BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
With COVID-19, so much is unknown.
Is this the worst you've seen?
But we are committed to getting you every piece of information we can as soon as we can.
Tell us about this first big win you have. What is it, 24 million N95 masks?
Fewer unknowns.
Who's winning here? Where is the pressure right now?
That's our goal.
What worries you the most? The time it's going to take for a vaccine?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after a new Volkswagen, we offer to pay your first 3 months finance payments and an additional £500 to £1,000 contribution to your deposit at 3.8% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
Well, yes, a new Golf or T-Cross. A Tiguan. No, Passat. Oh, I need to sit down.
Here, have a seat.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July excludes e-Golf at participating retailers only. Minimum 46 months to receive 3 months finance payments. Indemnities may be required. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer to book an appointment.
When your tenants have a burst pipe right in the middle of your busy day, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super plumber in 4 hours before you've even sat down to dinner. We can also assemble locksmiths, glaziers, electricians and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to £1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details visit costa.co.uk/terms.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We can replace your battery at over 700 stores and garages, or even at your home or work with our mobile experts, so you can enjoy an engine that starts first time, every time, and start enjoying the open road again.
Are we nearly there yet?
From battery replacements to tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
When family video calls are too good to miss. Your virtual quiz team is demanding a rematch. And one more episode just isn't enough. You need loads of data. Get a massive 30 gig for £10 a month from Smarty Mobile. With no speed restrictions, unlimited calls and texts, and a flexible 1-month plan, it's no wonder you Switch awarded Smarty Best Values SIM-Only Network 2020. Search Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. See smarty.co.uk.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Eurotunnel-Le-Château is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Stocks are up. Apple and Microsoft are among the best performers on the S&P. HSBC Holdings slumped after a report that some of U.S. President Donald Trump's advisors proposed to move to destabilize Hong Kong's currency peg as a way of punishing China. Gold topped $1,800 an ounce while Treasury yields climbed and the dollar slumped. Let's take a look at those numbers right now. The S&P 500 is up 0.7%, up 21. Off earlier highs, the Dow's up 0.6%, up 168. And the Nasdaq's up 1.1%, up 118. The 10-year's down 6/32, the yield 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate's up 0.2% at $40.70 a barrel. COMEX Gold is up 0.8% at $18.2440 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.45. The euro's $1.1336 and the British pound $1.2594. NVIDIA's market valuation briefly topped Intel's for the first time, powered by soaring demand for graphics chips in data centers and other fast-growing tech fields. NVIDIA's up 2.2%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Just want to bring you up to date with another Supreme Court decision out this morning. This one on the Obamacare contraceptive mandate. The Supreme Court upholding the Trump administration rule that gives employers and universities a broad right to opt out on religious grounds from the requirement in Obamacare that they offer free birth control. In other words, they don't have to offer free birth control now through their healthcare plans. Critics say the move could leave large numbers of women without ready access to birth control. It's been a hot button issue. Justices Breyer and Elena Kagan joining the court's Conservatives. It was a 7-2 decision. Still waiting on the Trump tax decision. That will come Thursday. These cases are the final ones now for the season. An unusual July session for the Supreme Court this year. Now let's turn back to the markets and bring in somebody who can tell us exactly what's going on, not just in the United States, but internationally. Clive Gilmore is CEO and Group CIO at Mondrian Investment Partners, about $41.5 billion in assets under management, and he joins us now. Clive, thanks for joining. We're seeing a continued creep higher. In fact, it's more like a canter higher these days. The odd day where we're seeing a down day. What's the basis for the optimism in this market?
Yeah, thank you. I think the key issue is one of liquidity. I think it's been talked about quite a bit because, as we know, the backdrop economically is not a good one. The jury's still out as to which country is dealing with the COVID-19 issue better. Certainly there's been a pickup of cases in the U.S., and if you'd just been looking at that data, you wouldn't believe that the U.S. market would go up. But it clearly has been going up. But I think the point that I'd really make is the difference between the type of stocks that are going up. I don't know if you're aware of this, but if you look at global equities, that's the U.S. combined with all the international opportunities, the biggest difference between so-called value and growth stocks historically was in the fourth quarter of 1999, where the difference was 14%. To put that into context today, we're only in early July, and the difference between growth and value is over 30%. In other words, growth stocks are outperforming value stocks by 30% globally year to date. So it's really a reflection of liquidity and trying to find the type of companies that are short-term beneficiaries of what's happening with COVID-19, allied to the fact that discount rates have come down so much, and they're future growth companies, obviously.
So, Clive, where do you see, when you and your team look globally, are there areas of the globe that you see and markets that you see compelling opportunity here, or is the risk from the pandemic just too much of an unknown right now?
Well, clearly, the jury is out as to what will happen, as I said, and it's difficult, therefore, to pinpoint exactly how the next 2 years will work out. However, one thing that it seems clear to me is nations with a greater creditor status or companies with strong balance sheets are likely to be in a better position looking forward. And if you look at that objectively, then you're left with a number of countries which would seem to put their head above the parapet as being interesting on a long-term basis. You may be surprised to hear me say that one of those is Japan. And the reason for that is that for years people have complained about return on equity in Japan, in part because Japanese companies don't have optimal balance sheets. But that cash now is proving to be very valuable because whilst they can have operational leverage, that's a change in revenue and its impact on profit, they're unlikely to have the problems related to financial leverage. And from a country point of view, obviously there are countries like Norway, Switzerland, Singapore, even Australia and New Zealand that have a much stronger fiscal position as nations themselves, which you'd expect to be beneficiaries. A quick word here on Hong Kong. You notice I omitted it from that list. Clearly, Hong Kong does have a strong financial position, but there are various concerns within the Hong Kong framework. Its proximity to China being the obvious one. Yep. The issue with the peg, which I think you've raised before, which I think is a fascinating one, because the Chinese renminbi is believed to be pegged against a basket of currencies, and the Hong Kong dollar only against the US dollar. So even if President Trump wasn't saying what he was saying about the peg, there may be pressure on the Hong Kong dollar peg at some point anyway. So I think perhaps Hong Kong's not the optimal place to look for in Asia, but perhaps Singapore and Japan.
Do you really think that this time might be different when it comes to the Hong Kong peg, though, Clive?
Yes, actually. Look, people have always said the whole point of a peg, right, is if it breaks, it will never hold again. You can't. It's very difficult to re-peg because no one believes it's ever going to hold. So I think the community worldwide of investors and the monetary community more generally believe that the Hong Kong dollar peg is going to hold. But as I said, there's pressure anyway because for some time the Chinese government wanted to renminbify trade within Hong Kong. And that means in the long term you would expect greater integration with Hong Kong and China. And if that's the case, it's difficult to believe that one currency could be pegged against a basket including the euro, for example, and the other currency could be pegged merely against the US dollar. That seems to make very little sense to me long term.
Clive Gilmore, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it as always. Clive Gilmore, CEO and Group CIO at Mondrian Investment Partners. They have about $41 billion under management based in London, giving us, as always, a very broad perspective on global investing around the world where opportunities might be. And again, as Clive was saying, that there's certainly lots of uncertainty out there as it relates to the pandemic, but also some opportunities out there. Again, we have central banks around the globe providing liquidity. It's not just the Federal Reserve, but the ECB, the Bank of Japan, and others providing tremendous amounts of liquidity in this market. And, as many strategists have stated, it's kind of a backstop for...
New stop on profit placed for euro at 113.19.9. Okay, 113.19.9. This is just great. We're already, how much? So 4,000 pounds in profit on euro against United States dollar.
Pharmacy plans to start building the clinics later this year. United Airlines warned employees that a jump in coronavirus infections is jeopardizing recovery for U.S. travel. The airline has seen a sharp drop in bookings, especially at its Newark, New Jersey hub, as states in the New York metro area add new quarantine rules for travelers. And Warren Buffett gave Berkshire Hathaway shares valued at about $2.9 billion to charities, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as part of his annual plan started more than a decade ago. Buffett has given more than $37 billion since 2006. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. they have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. How long will it take?
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
And action!
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to an algorithm or to someone called Al, or Priya, or Lewis, or Zoe, or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, it's Ali. Can I give you a hand?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without? With? Without? With? Without? Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors? The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
How do we control coronavirus now? Here's Michael, a delivery driver.
All day, every day, I'm seeing people. Last thing I want to do is give anyone coronavirus. So the first sign of a cough, soon as my temperature rises, any loss of taste or smell, I'm staying in, booking a test, only going out to get it done. I mean, you want to know straight away, right? That's how we protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
This half hour, we're going to be looking at bankruptcies, specifically retail bankruptcies and how they have progressed throughout the pandemic. And on that note, a little later on, we're going to be speaking with Matt Winkler, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus, on the President's record on the economy. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash now from Greg Jarrett.
Bonnie, this flash is sponsored by Commonwealth Financial Network, delivering the support you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamt of. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. I was wondering why West Texas Intermediate edged into the red. We get this word from EIA. Crude oil inventories are up by 5.65 million barrels. That just crossed the Bloomberg terminal. Meanwhile, stocks are edging higher, bolstered by gains on information technology stocks that set a renewed buying tone after investors snapped a winning streak in the U.S. session yesterday. Although another record jump in cases of COVID-19 are keeping upbeat sentiment somewhat in check. Let's take a look at the numbers as we do every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 now up 0.6% of 18. The Dow's up 0.5%, up 140, and the Nasdaq's up 1%, up 103. The 10-year is down 8/30 seconds with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate, as I say, is edging into the red. It's still a little changed at $40.58 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.9% at $18.2570 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.47. The euro is $1.1336, and the British pound $1.2588. Now that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Well, Vonnie, I got my first job on Wall Street more than 30 years ago, and one of my first stops was Brooks Brothers to get the suit, which was required uniform for Wall Street, and has been ever since. But unfortunately, like a lot of retailers, Brooks Brothers facing hard times here, accelerated by the pandemic, and also, they filed bankruptcy earlier today, filed for Chapter 11. So let's get the latest from Lauren Coleman-Lochner. She's consumer and retail reporter for Bloomberg News. Lauren, thanks so much for joining us. Give us the background of what's happened here to this iconic brand for men's and women's clothing that is Brooks Brothers.
Sure. So Brooks Brothers expanded a lot over the years, and what was once considered a very aspirational Wall Street brand became sort of a Main Street brand. They opened in a number of malls in the U.S. and became, I would say, a little bit more ordinary. But part of the problem with that also was they overexpanded like so many retailers. And so the U.S. stores, a lot of the stores that were in malls, which have, of course, been having a lot of issues, have dragged down the performance of the company.
Interestingly, though, and we will likely see a lot more of this as the weeks go on, literally just as you were getting on the line, Lauren, Brooks Brothers secured financing of $75 million from WHP Capital and now says it's going to proceed to reopen the majority of its retail stores. Explain this process to us. How can somebody be going bankrupt, declare bankruptcy, and suddenly be totally fine?
Well, it's not really that simple. And sometimes you have a situation where a company files for bankruptcy. When you file for bankruptcy as a retailer, you have an opportunity to reject leases without penalties. But we've seen cases, and a recent, more local example of this was Fairway, which had a lot of suburban stores dragging it down, found itself back in bankruptcy court 2 years later with, most of the company sold off and closed, and only a handful of stores remaining because they did not fix those stores and did not close those other stores in the earlier bankruptcy.
So
the brand internationally has remained pretty strong, but it is a lot of those U.S. locations that have hurt them.
So, Lauren, how much of the problems right now, the bankruptcy right now, how much do you think can be attributed to the pandemic versus just broader retail trends, maybe broader trends in clothing, how people dress and all those types of things? But that might be more long-term.
Yeah, so of course for Brooks Brothers and a number of other retailers, these trends certainly predated the pandemic. People are certainly not dressing up for work now, but that's a trend, as we know, that made the fortunes of retailers like the Gap. People were dressing more casually. And then, the big power brokers on Wall Street were going to other retailers and buying brands that are considered more upscale. So you have sort of the hollowing out of that middle and even upper middle. And those changing work habits means that Brooks Brothers was struggling long before the pandemic hit.
And we see that with some of the other companies that have filed for bankruptcy as well, Neiman Marcus, J. Crew, John Barbados, for example. Will those brands just go away, or do you think there's enough private equity money out there that will try and plough some resources into some of these brands and they'll continue in some sort of capacity?
So there's certainly interest in many of these brands, and I think it's a question right now for buyers of what demand is going to look like and what the workplace is going to look like and what consumers are going to look like after the pandemic. And I'm not sure that people have those answers yet, especially since we have seen the virus raging in other parts of the country now. I think there's certainly a lot of equity in brands like J. Crew and Brooks Brothers. But again, you have to figure out, what are you willing to pay? How much can you grow this business? Do you have financing available? And I think that a lot of these brands are not going to survive, or are going to survive and I'm not suggesting those particular names won't, but that you may see them in a very shrunken form if they do survive.
Lauren, just real quickly, what's the digital presence for Brooks Brothers? Because that's kind of a make or break for a lot of
just looking at it now.
Brands.
They're selling face masks these days for $20 for 5.
Well, all right, so they're on trend. Yeah, I actually don't have a good handle on how much they have done on that front.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have a presence, but it's hard to know how much exactly they do.
I don't know how important that is for them.
Lauren, who's next?
Oh my gosh! Well, look, we have a lot that we're watching, as we've reported. We've certainly named a few, including Athena and Tailored Brands. So, and then there could, the traditional time for retailers to file has always been in the beginning of the year when they're, flush with their holiday cash. And I've certainly spoken to a number of people who think that there are retailers who are struggling but have enough money to get through this year, and then holiday is really the big question mark now, of course, and that we'll see another wave in the first quarter.
Yeah, it's going to be a strange Black Friday season, to say the least, this year, and never mind beyond that. Lauren Coleman-Lochner, keeping an eye on all things retail for us and all things bankruptcy. Thank you for joining us. And if you want to take a look at the bankruptcy headlines on the Bloomberg, it's at NIBCY file for the bankruptcy filings. So that is our retail segment these days. I think most of them will have an element of this kind of conversation to them. Let's head now, though, to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C., and Nathan Hager.
Ivani, we're following a couple of key Supreme Court rulings on religious decisions on this, what we now know is the final week of the High Court's 2020 term. In a 7-2 ruling, the justices upheld a Trump administration rule that lets employers opt out of offering free birth control under Obamacare if they have religious objections. In another 7-2 decision, the High Court expanded a shield for religious groups from workplace discrimination lawsuits. They threw out bias claims from a couple of teachers who were fired from 2 Catholic schools in California. Justices Stephen Breyer and Elena Kagan joined the court's conservatives in both decisions. The court says it will issue the final decisions of its term tomorrow. It has yet to rule on subpoenas for President Trump's financial records. House Appropriations subcommittees continue to meet during their recess to pass spending bills for government departments. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman has an update from Washington.
Bills reflect Democratic priorities, including more money for scientific research and subsidies for police contingent on reform measures. Ranking Republican Robert Aderholt.
This side of the aisle could have supported bipartisan police training reforms and other timely initiatives if the majority had not bowed to the pressure to defund the police.
Democrat Matt Cartwright.
We are not in favor of defunding police. We have $500 million more going to states and municipalities to fight fund ongoing police reform initiatives.
The bill passed on a party line voice vote. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks, Irv. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nathan Hager. This is Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
The big Volkswagen event is now on. If you're after an approved used Volkswagen, for a limited time, you can buy one with 2 years warranty, 2 years MOT cover, 2 years roadside assistance, and 2 services all included at 8.9% APR representative. Hello, sir. Do any take your fancy?
I need to sit down.
The big Volkswagen event. With every type of car on offer, you may have trouble choosing. With Solutions Personal Contract Plan until 12th of July at participating retailers on used Volkswagens aged between 90 days and 60 months only. Indemnities may be required. Warranty valid for vehicles up to 100,000 miles at activation. MOT cover is up to 2 years and is underwritten by UK General Insurance Limited. Volkswagen Finance. Contact your local retailer.
When your tenants have a blown fuse box right in the middle of your busy day, superheroes crashing through the wall isn't going to help anyone. With Direct Line Landlord Emergency added to your policy, we're on it to send a rather super electrician in 4 hours before you've even sat down to dinner. We can also assemble plumbers, locksmiths, glaziers and drainage engineers. Search Direct Line Landlord Emergency. We're on it. Direct Line. Residential properties. Optional add-on up to 1,500 per caller. Extreme weather conditions may extend response time. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. We fit car tyres for over 500,000 customers every year. We could fit yours at one of over 350 garages, or even on your driveway with our mobile experts, which means you can safely hit the road again and surprise that special someone. Happy birthday! From tyre fittings to MOTs, there really is no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
False information about coronavirus is being spread everywhere. Popping up here, being shared there. Ping! Reaching and tricking more people with every share. They don't even understand the harm it can cause.
False information can be hard to spot. Make sure you know what you're sharing. Don't feed the beast. Visit sharechecklist.gov.uk. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Let's finish this. Tonight, it's Sheffield United v Wolves and Brighton v Liverpool in a cracking doubleheader. And with Now TV, you can watch both games live for just $9.99. Hold on, they're checking with VAR.
That's confirmed. It's $9.99.
Good call. Game on. So, grab a Now TV Sky Sports Day Pass. Search Now TV Sports. 18 plus content streamed via internet. Full terms apply.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Well off earlier highs, stocks are still in the green. The biggest tech companies are the ones racking up any gains, overshadowing new tensions between Washington and Beijing and the uncertain outlook for an economic recovery. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 0.5%, up 15. The Dow's now up 0.4%, up 100. And the Nasdaq's up 1%, up 103. The 10-year's down 7/30 seconds. The yield is 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude had been in the green. It's now little changed, but slightly down at $40.61 a barrel. COMEX gold is up just about 1% at $18.2720 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.47. The euro, $1.1338. And the British pound, $1.2595. Allstate has agreed to buy National General for about $4 billion in cash from the auto insurer's biggest acquisition ever. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is time now for Bloomberg Opinion. Let's bring in Bloomberg Opinion columnist and, of course, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus of Bloomberg News, also the co-founder, it should be said, of Bloomberg News, Matt Winkler. Matt, welcome. We're speaking to you in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Your latest column, Trump inherited the world's best economy in 2017 and helped make it one of the worst. That's the main contention of the column. Matt, explain to those who don't fully understand what the president could have done to actually hurt the economy.
As everyone knows by now, and it's, by the way, great to be with you, Bonnie, the coronavirus pandemic was something that all of us had to prepare for. When I say all of us, every country, there was no question about that. And instead of preparing, the Trump administration, led by Trump himself, was defying science, muddling the message. He was constantly attacking people for all kinds of reasons. And so there was massive confusion. So instead of any kind of coordinated attempt to contain the virus, it was essentially every state was on its own. And some states did a very good job shutting down, like New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts and pretty much all of New England. But other states took Trump's message and said, we can open the economy. We don't have to fear about anything. In fact, Trump himself said the virus would go away. That confusion made it possible for the economy to actually be hit in all kinds of ways, because instead of a coordinated effort like you had in France or Germany or any number of developed nations, you had a completely confused one. And so our jobless numbers are off the charts, as you know. I mean, 14% plus unemployment in April, even as down to 11. That's more than 3 times the UK's rate. So we are leading, as you know, in total number of cases, and we are leading in deaths. For a country that historically has prided itself on its science, prided itself on its medical care, we're a complete mess now. And there's no sign that our unemployment rate, which is the worst since Harry Truman was in the White House, is going to get anything close to what it was before the pandemic started. So Matt, yes, it's a combination of all these things, and clearly he has made it much worse than it had to be.
So, Matt, I guess, this is my first pandemic, global pandemic, but I was just shocked at the fact that it is a national problem. Why do we not have a national/federal response? I was, shocked to see governors basically, as you say, kind of having to fend for themselves and some doing better than others. Why do you think initially there wasn't, and there still is not today, a coherent federal response?
Because of leadership at the top, because there was contempt for a shutdown, which was what was required. There was contempt for universal masking, which was the message from on high. So the federal government essentially abdicated its responsibility to Americans and left it to the states to figure it out. And so that's why we're dealing with this the way we are. Not the case in the UK, not the case in France, not the case in Germany, not the case really anywhere else. Certainly not the case in Hong Kong, which has a great record because they have experience going all the way back to the beginning of this century with SARS, and they know that masks work, and which is why the pandemic basically has disappeared into insignificance in Hong Kong, which is one of the most densely populated places on the earth. So if Hong Kong could do it, we certainly could have too, but our federal response was non-existent.
The richest country in the world that can borrow at probably the lowest rate in the world and from anybody and hold on to it for the longest time. Why isn't there more anger, Matt, at the fact that 130,000 Americans have died? And sure, some of them would have died anyway, but perhaps not that many.
Well, I think there is anger. I think there was an assumption at the beginning of the year before the pandemic started that there was a very good chance Trump would have a second term because the economy was, relatively speaking, doing well. That is no longer the case. I mean, you read Bloomberg or any other news organization right now, and every poll in every so-called battleground state shows the tide has shifted dramatically away from him. So I have to believe a lot of this has to do with the pandemic itself, is that he so bungled it, mishandled it, and compounded the suffering for so many people that even people who were willing to give him a chance again have no longer come around to that view.
Is there a chance, Matt, that this, not only impacts the president, but also perhaps the Republican Party in general as we think about the Senate in 2020?
Yeah, look, it's sort of really above my knowledge to go further on politics, but it stands to reason that the president's enablers are going to be in the same political peril as he will be because they're part of the problem. I mean, so if you have governors, for example, who said you don't need to wear a mask, we should reopen the economy, made something that should have been a scientific matter a political issue, those people who are mostly Republicans are going to probably pay for that mistake, which is what it is. It's a mistake.
Matt, you point out in your column that France... Sorry, Matt. You point out in your column that France, Italy and Spain were similarly victimised, but their unemployment is about half the percentage of Americans out of work, which is a phenomenal track record, really. What about the UK, though? You don't really criticise Boris Johnson, and yet there has been severe criticism of how he's handled the crisis.
Well, I think that's right, except that he actually did get COVID-19. He suffered. His voters saw that he suffered, and when he recovered, fortunately, he did have a message, and the message was we have to do this in a concerted way. So the UK may have been slow initially, and there may have been some skepticism at the top, but the UK did actually come around and has been since then, since Boris Johnson was victimized. They have had a pretty good record, and their unemployment rate, of course, is well below ours, and also their economy is performing better for the time being.
Matt Winkler, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate that. Matt Winkler is co-founder of Bloomberg News and editor-in-chief emeritus of Bloomberg News. A fascinating column just kind of comparing the U.S. response to the pandemic versus other countries around the world, and particularly as it relates to the economic impact. And you look at data such as unemployment, for example, and likely a GDP print that we're going to get soon. It's going to be the U.S. does not compare well, and Matt's column kind of calls that out. You can see Matt's work at Bloomberg.com/opinion. Plus, if you're on the terminal OPIN Go, you can see all of Matt's opinion work, plus that of Bloomberg Opinion. Some great work put out daily basis by the good folks at Bloomberg Opinion. We'll have more coming up. This is Bloomberg.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
This is a message from the RNLI and Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Beach lifeguards can't be everywhere this summer, so they can't always protect your family, but you can. So keep an eye on your loved ones. Avoid taking risks in the sea. Don't use inflatables. In an emergency, dial 999 for the Coast Guard. Get more advice at rnli.org/beach2020. Thank you.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, Kenan Thompson. He's the longest-running cast member ever on Saturday Night Live, and it took him years to feel like he belonged.
It just never seemed real for so long. Like, I had such a hard time even associating myself being on the show for a long time. Like, I wouldn't watch, you know what I'm saying, just because I felt like I was ruining it.
Kenan Thompson joins us next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
How do you kind of view the volatility in the marketplace here?
The harshest downturn for American workers in history.
Companies across the board, across industries, really trying to shore up their balance sheets.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
There's only so much that you can speed up vaccine development. Because of all the dislocations, there's always relative value trades that you could be doing.
This could be a U-shaped recession rather than a V-shaped recession.
It's the uncertainty, I think, that is really spooking everyone.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
This hour, we're going to be hearing from broadcaster Barry Diller on the future of media during and post-pandemic. We'll also be talking the president's visit with the president of Mexico. AMLO is coming to town. Duncan Wood of the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute will talk to us about the visit and USMCA. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash now from Greg Jarrett.
Stocks are still up, but well off earlier highs. Apple and Microsoft are among the best performers on the S&P. HSBC Holdings slumped after a report that some of President Donald Trump's advisors proposed to move to destabilize Hong Kong's currency peg. as a way of punishing China. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P is now up 0.5%, up 15. The Dow is up 0.4%, up 102, and the Nasdaq's up over 1%, up 106. The 10 years down 730 seconds. The yield 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude's back in the green, up 0.2% at 40.71 a barrel, while COMEX gold is up 0.75% at 18.2330 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.51. The euro $1.13.27, and the British pound $1.25.95. World's most popular hedge fund strategies no longer working. Lansdowne Partners this week shuttered the long-short equity fund that made it famous, raising fears about the future of peers who make money by betting on winning stocks and shorting losers. Sloan Robinson also called it a day after more than 25 years of buying and selling equities. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn, all Sweden.
Greg Jarrett, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Looking at a little bit of green on the screen as Greg was just reporting. Let's get a sense of what's happening in the world of small and mid-cap stocks. We can do that with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at?
Well, I'm looking at a Russell 2000 index that's lower for starters. It's off by 0.1%, while the S&P 500 is higher by 0.4%. So smaller companies not keeping up with larger ones for sure. Biggest drop in the Russell belongs to Centogene, the ticker there CNTG. The drug developer has fallen about 17.5%. Centogene is selling 3.5 million shares for itself and on behalf of company insiders. Fossil Group, ticker FOSL, has lost 9.5% after Classic Fund Management disclosed the sale of its entire stake in the watchmaker. The Liechtenstein-based fund owns 6.4% of Fossil shares at the end of last year. Now, the Russell's sharpest gain belongs to National General Holdings, ticker NGHC. The property casualty insurer has jumped 64.5% after accepting a $4 billion takeover offer from Allstate. Clean Energy Fuels, ticker CLNE, is up 57.5%. The operator of natural gas filling stations will work with Chevron to serve trucks at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach in California. And Intersect ENT, ticker XENT, is up about 31%. People with knowledge of the matter said the maker of ear, nose, and throat devices received a takeover offer from Medtronic.
Dave Wilson, thank you for that rundown there on small caps. Much appreciated. N.I. Wilson on the Bloomberg. He also has the chart of the day. You can receive it if you email him at dwilson@bloomberg.net. Legendary broadcaster Barry Diller, creator of Fox Broadcasting and now chairman and senior executive at IAC and Expedia Group, has spoken exclusively with Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker. This about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously, challenges to the global travel industry, his disappointment with the Trump administration, and whether it's time to start regulating Amazon, Facebook, and Google. Let's have a listen to what he has to say about breaking up big tech.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I believe in breakup as an effective as being effective. But I've been saying for many years now that regulation must come as these businesses grow ever larger, and I'm particularly thinking in this case about Google, but the others as well, as they become, Google is the only actual monopoly. The others have varying levels of competition. But they're absolutely, when you have monopoly power, you have to have regulation. And I think in the next couple of years, we'll probably get closer to it than we've ever been. I think that's healthy.
A growing number of companies are boycotting ad spending on Facebook over that company's policies on hate speech. Is that the right thing to do? Are you doing the same thing?
No. No, we're not. Look, we're not going to obviously support what we think is hate speech, and we're pretty careful about that. I've been I'm very much a supporter of Mark Zuckerberg. I think he's obviously brilliant, but also I think he's completely decent. I thought that his policy of saying, I'm not going to regulate essentially political advertising was wise, because I think it's almost impossible to try and regulate what people say politically either for or against something. And I'm speaking of the candidates themselves and the apparatus around them and all of that. I just think that's sliding into a bad business. So, however, when there is identified hate speech, and I think they are addressing it, of course you're going to try and not promulgate that using the tools that you can use. I don't believe in boycotts. I think a, quote, boycott against Facebook is ill-advised and ill-considered. And, you know, I'm hopeful. I think that Facebook is addressing the extreme forms of speech. But the truth is that, and you find it in any group of people, more than two, which is you're going to have opinion. When people have can have voice to their opinion and are amplified by our internet communications miasma throughout the world, you're going to get a lot. I mean, go on Slack or go on any channel of your own colleagues, give them anonymous voice. They're going to say terrible things about you. Not all of them, but some of them will. Get used to it.
That was Barry Diller, Chairman and Senior Executive at IAC and Expedia Group, speaking exclusively with Bloomberg's Eric Schatzker. You can hear the entire interview on the Bloomberg terminal or after noon Eastern time today on Bloomberg.com. And what I love, Vonnie, about Barry Diller is there's very little filter there. He says what's exactly on his mind. He doesn't mind defending anybody, anytime. And so you tend to get the straight scoop there. And I think he's suggesting that, you know, there's not much Facebook can do. It's a slippery slope, and he doesn't necessarily fault Mark Zuckerberg for his, I guess, policy there.
It is interesting. There was a story on the Bloomberg today as well that the fact that corona misinformation has been flourishing online is actually a problem. And, you know, data shows that at least $25 million will go to websites this year that have misinformation on them. 480 English language websites were looked at by this company GDI, and brands such as L'Oreal, Wayfair and Canon are among brands featured on these websites. And you know, one of the things suggested by our story is that the brands could be more vocal and themselves pull ads from tech platforms when they see this behavior, because as you say, the platforms themselves are trying to be agnostic, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation for a lot of these platforms. Are they media companies like, for example, the New York Times that have editorial responsibility and policies, or are they merely technology platforms for other people's voices?
Or are they benefiting from the ambiguity on both sides of that answer?
Yes, exactly right. But the bottom line is advertisers, as we all know, have been flooding towards these digital media platforms, these social media platforms. And so we've seen some advertisers temporarily pull back from Facebook and some other platforms. We'll see if that has an impact. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines. We can do that with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, President Trump is threatening to cut off funding to schools that don't reopen this fall. In a series of tweets, the president said Democrats think it will be bad for them politically if schools resume before the November election. He also says he disagrees with the Centers for Disease Control's guidelines on reopening. He calls them very tough and expensive. The head of the nation's largest teachers union, Lily Eskelsen Garcia, is calling the president's approach callous.
Little people can get sick. You have asthma, you've got bad allergies, and you're 6 years old. You could die if we do this wrong.
A House committee says President Trump doesn't have the authority to cut off school funds. And New York City's Democratic Mayor Bill de Blasio says schools in the city will reopen this fall under a hybrid approach. Some classes online, others in person. Today, Florida reported another 4.7% increase in COVID-19 cases. That's more than yesterday's increase, but still below the 7-day average. The state's median age of patients is up to 40. That's the highest since they started keeping track. And Texas reported a record 60 new deaths from the coronavirus yesterday. The Trump administration is ramping up testing in Texas, Florida, and Louisiana To try to get a better handle on the outbreak, and Vice President Mike Pence is leading a meeting of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. It'll hold a briefing that you can hear on Bloomberg Radio at 11:30 Wall Street time. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman is reportedly leaving the military. He's the former Ukraine expert who was fired from the White House National Security Council after testifying in the House impeachment inquiry. His lawyer tells CNN he's blaming bullying by the president. Global news on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Coronavirus proved that every aspect of our lives, from business to health, is connected to Asia.
Healthcare firms testing the appetite for IPOs in Hong Kong too.
But you already knew that.
COVID-19 certainly had an impact on this.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern.
What does that mean for Asia if the dollar remains on the back foot for the foreseeable future?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hope you enjoyed your meal. And I just want to say, he's lucky to have a brother like you.
Lucky? Caring for my brother is far from easy. But he's a part of me, like my arms and legs, so I'll be his. No time for tired. Nothing can disable this love. He needs me, but I'm the lucky one, even though I need help now and then.
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community support for your strength. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
If trying to figure out the future of your business is keeping you up at night,
are you seeing it come back at all?
At least you have company.
What do you make of the most recent virus headlines?
How should labor respond?
You're hoping to get political pressure?
Experts, information, breaking news, all day, all night, everywhere.
Do you expect the euro to continue to strengthen? Why even have this hearing?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Economics.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Nothing phases the money combo because his...
Hey, hi Manash. Sorry, I can't give you any advice. I'm a trader. So in order to give an advice, you need to have a license, all these kind of things. No, we just trading company, we invest money. So I can't give you much advice. Okay? Sorry, mate.
Good. We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Home alone or with housemates, stay home as much as possible. Try to allow only people you live with into your home. Wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home and isolate from housemates. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
This is Mike Golick Jr. from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Wingo, Dad, and I sit down and discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
Staying current on college hoops starts here on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. CBS sports columnists Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander bring you commentary, insider information, and statistical analysis covering the entire NCAA.
The amount of earning potential you could have had there, or if you had gone to play at any other place with a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, win a national championship, none of us would have faulted Cunningham for doing that, but he decided this is where he wants to be in the face of a postseason.
Search Eye on College Basketball on TuneIn to listen.
Okay, here we go. With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Foot's off the pedal as U.S. stocks have come off earlier gains amid tensions between Washington and Beijing, and also an uncertain outlook for economic recovery. Tech shares, however, continue to outperform. Now we take a look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. The S&P 500 is now up only 0.1%, up 4. The Dow's up less than 0.1%. In fact, I'll call it little changed, up 15. The Nasdaq's up 0.6%, up 66. The 10-year's down 6/30 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. West Texas Intermediate's little change now at 40.59 a barrel, while COMEX Gold's up 0.75% at 18.2330 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.46. The euro $1.1328, and the British pound $1.2584. Brooks Brothers did file for bankruptcy, felled by the pandemic's impact on clothing sales and its own heavy debt load. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or AMLO, is coming to the United States today. He is the president of Mexico, and the president is coming to visit President Trump today to get a sense of kind of what the agenda might be and what the outcomes could be. We welcome Duncan Wood, director of the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute. Duncan, thanks so much for joining us here. What is the purpose of this trip?
Well, the official purpose is actually to celebrate the coming into force of the USMCA agreement, which began last week on July 1st. But a lot of people are questioning really why it's necessary to come up and talk about this once all the hard work has been done. And so the Mexican government and the U.S. government have said that this is an important opportunity to discuss bilateral relations in the context of the pandemic. But unfortunately, we really don't have much more detail than that. We suspect that there will be conversations about drugs and organized crime in Mexico. We suspect that there will be conversations about ongoing collaboration on stopping Central American migration. And perhaps the most intriguing part of the visit is going to be a dinner that will be held at the White House tonight, where Andrés Manuel López Obrador, president of Mexico, and President Donald Trump will sit down with about 20 business leaders from both countries. And what we expect is that in that dinner, a lot of awkward questions could be raised by the U.S. business community about the way that President López Obrador is running the Mexican economy, and in particular, regulatory and legislative changes that are threatening the certainty that investors have enjoyed up to this point.
Well, what certainty have investors enjoyed? It feels like it's been such a volatile time, and the relationship between President Trump and AMLO has been extremely strained. And secondary to that question, what changed? AMLO is now suddenly a fan of President Trump?
It's an extraordinary relationship that we've seen developing over the past few years. I remember that back in 2018, when López Obrador was still a candidate for the presidency, he published a book called...
Position closed on euro against US dollar. and we have whopping £4,000 in profit. As you can see, anybody who follow our trade, they could see basically when we purchased and when we sold it. So whole trade lasted how long? 2 hours, 4,000 profit.
And Andrés Manuel López Obrador has consistently said that he wants a relationship of mutual respect with the United States. And every time that there has been provocation from the northern side of the border, then Andrés Manuel has refused to respond, instead saying that he wants relationships of love and peace with the world. And so what we've seen is that over time, Donald Trump has actually come to recognize López Obrador as a friend, as a partner, and that's an extraordinary achievement in many ways. But what I think a lot of people are questioning is whether or not this will play out well for the Mexican president, both at home and here in the United States, in particular with Mexican migrant communities who have been left out of this visit. And, let's not forget that those same Mexican migrants are sending record levels of remittances back to their families in Mexico at a time when they need it the most.
Duncan, what's the feeling in Mexico about this visit? I mean, we have a U.S. presidential election just 4 months away here. I mean, is there concern here that this is just a political stunt by AMLO in support of President Trump?
So there's all kinds of speculation in Mexico. Back in, I think it was April of this year, Mexico came to a deal with OPEC Plus on cutting oil production, but it wasn't able to deliver as much of a cut as OPEC Plus was demanding. And in that case, President Trump said that the United States would cut its production even more so as to compensate for Mexico not being able to deliver. And in exchange, Mexico kind of owed the United States a favor. And in Mexico, a lot of people are saying, is this the favor that Donald Trump demanded? We have no evidence that that's the case. However, what we do see is that there is a lot of concern amongst the intellectual elites in Mexico that this does set a bad precedent, in particular because in addition to meeting with President Trump during what is clearly a very vibrant and dynamic campaign year, electoral year here in the United States, there is no meeting planned with candidate former Vice President Joe Biden. And the folks from the Biden campaign have been coming out and tweeting that they don't think that this is appropriate, that they think this is the wrong time for AMLO to come to Washington. So it has become highly controversial in that way. But let me just tell you one thing. President López Obrador does seem to have his finger on the pulse of the Mexican electorate, because 59% of Mexicans support him making the trip at this time.
Very, very briefly, we're out of time, but how is Mexico doing on coronavirus?
Unfortunately, Mexico is doing extremely badly. Here in the United States, we face enormous problems. In Mexico, we have a terrible situation. We're seeing the number of dead rising over 30,000. We're seeing that the reporting is really inadequate, so we really don't know the full extent of the crisis. And certainly the Mexican healthcare system is under enormous strain. And so this is a true crisis for the country, and in fact it is a true crisis for the Mexican president. And many people have speculated that's another reason why he wants to distract attention and come and visit the United States at this point.
We have to leave it there with Duncan. Thank you for all of the intelligence. Duncan Wood is director of the Mexico Institute at the Wilson Center, Washington, D.C. And, of course, we will be keeping an eye out on all of those meetings today with AMLO and, of course, the dinner this evening as well. There are several public events sort of scheduled as well that we'll be able to bring you live. Speaking of bringing you something live, at 11:30, so in just about 5 minutes, Vice President Mike Pence will lead a White House coronavirus task force briefing at the U.S. Department of Education. We're going to bring that to you live as well. And a headline just a moment ago, United Airlines is warning 36,000 employees in the US their jobs are at risk.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are edging slightly higher with the Dow at 50 points. Analysts are debating what comes next for the economy as states allow businesses to reopen. But the hope among many traders is that infections will prove manageable. President Trump said he's considering a ban on the short video app TikTok in the U.S. That would be one possible way to retaliate against China for its handling of the coronavirus. TikTok's parent is based in China. The parent company of mortgage giant Quicken Loans has filed for an IPO. Rocket Company said it has made a profit in the last 3 years. Rocket describes itself as the largest retail mortgage lender in the U.S. And many Americans plan to spend less than before the coronavirus pandemic hit. More than 40% of adults say they'll cut back on some of the discretionary spending that struggling retailers need. That's according to a survey from creditcards.com. The planned cutbacks may compound the already massive economic impact of the virus. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said, "Only you can prevent wildfires." But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Reopening.
The reopening rotation has taken place.
How will it happen?
Healthcare is obviously very much in focus.
What's next?
Surely it's better to have an extension.
What if?
So this is going to be industry-wide.
At least there's one question you can have answered. Where to keep up?
We have the latest world and national news.
Right here.
This departed from a policy he had long had.
This is about people that you care about.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. In-depth analysis.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a robot or to someone called Robert or Sean or Luth or Ange or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, it's Ali. Can I give you a hand?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
False information about coronavirus is being spread everywhere. Popping up here, being shared there. Ping! Reaching and tricking more people with every share. They don't even understand the harm it can cause.
False information can be hard to spot. Make sure you know what you're sharing. Don't feed the beast. Visit sharechecklist.gov.uk. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Listening has always taught us a lot at Honda. And lately, we've been listening to your thumbs. Because thumbs can do everything now. The world is at their thumb tips. So now, the My Honda Plus app lets the thumb take control of your car too. Even when you're not inside the new Honda E, your thumb can find where you parked, set the temperature before you get in, check how much the battery is charged, and schedule charging for when electricity is cheapest. The new Honda E and My Honda Plus app. Oh, a thumbs up. Honda, the power of dreams.
Staying current on college hoops starts here on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. CBS Sports columnists Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander bring you commentary, insider information, and statistical analysis covering the entire NCAA.
The amount of earning potential you could have had there, or if you had gone to play at any other place with a chance to play in the NCAA tournament, win a national championship, none of us would have faulted Cunningham for doing that, but he decided this is where he wants to be in the face of a postseason.
Search Eye on College Basketball on TuneIn to listen.
This is Mike Golick Jr. from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Wingo, Dad, and I sit down and discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
We're going to be speaking with Wes Freeman, CEO of Brown Harris Stevens, on the luxury residential real estate market in a moment. We're also going to be hearing from the Vice President of the United States, a coronavirus task force scheduled for this half hour. First, let's get a Bloomberg Business Flash from Greg Jarrett.
Why, thank you, Bonnie. Let's see. U.S. equities are slumping right now. Mid-tensions between Washington and Beijing, and that uncertain outlook for an economic recovery. Tech shares did outperform. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is little changed right now. Dow Jones Industrial Average is also little changed, up 6, and the Nasdaq is up 0.4%, up 43. The 10-year is down 5/30 seconds. The yield 0.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.1% at 40.66 a barrel, while COMEX gold's up 0.6% at 18.1980 an ounce. The dollar yen is 107.46. The euro's $1.1326. And the British pound, the $1.2584. You may have already heard United Airlines Holdings has notified 36,000 U.S. employees, or 45% of the workforce. Their jobs are at risk after federal payroll aid expires at the end of this summer. The final layoff tally has not been finalized and may be smaller as workers weigh in or offer to leave voluntarily, according to United. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting witham.com. Well, this COVID pandemic and the resulting economic dislocation has impacted all sorts of industries. That includes the residential real estate business in markets across the country, including a lot of luxury markets. To get the latest, we welcome Bess Friedman. She's CEO of Brown Harris Stevens. Bess, thanks so much for joining us here. Give us a snapshot. Let's start with Manhattan, kind of the real estate market here. This was a market that was hit early and hit very hard by the pandemic. Where are we now?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Well, we just opened up on June 22nd, which meant real estate professionals were able to show. So that's been very good, but it's slow and steady. People are still trying to figure things out. We're very much in the discovery mode after months of being shut down, not being able to show properties. And so now everybody's trying to figure out what they're going to do. Are they going to rent? Are they going to sell? Do they want to buy? And so agents are trying to work through all of that. And we're seeing new properties come on the market every day, a lot of rentals as well. And so at this point, we're still looking at the data and trying to figure out what's going to be in the next quarter, the third quarter. So it's still new and slow and steady is what I would say about New York City. But other markets like Palm Beach, our Connecticut market, has done incredibly well. There's been, there's not enough supply there. And the Hamptons, another market that's done very well. So New York, yes, has been harder because of, it's a city, it's vertical living. It offers different challenges that other places don't have because we're getting into elevators, we're in lobbies with each other, so it's going to be a little bit slower for our recovery.
Bess, anecdotally, I think a lot of people thought, or particularly people who had lived through the great financial crisis in New York City, that there would be a big downdraft in prices because people were suddenly put out of work or they were, uncertain about their future. Perhaps they needed to spend money on medical bills or put money aside for their parents or what have you. Did that happen? Could that happen still?
I think it's possible. We're still trying to unravel all of this. I think there's a lot of credence in the ability of the Fed and the Treasury to bring about this economic recovery. So that's been good. But, businesses are going to close down. We know restaurants will. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty as this pandemic looms. We're seeing upticks in other places where it has been mismanaged by certain governors, for sure. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time to figure out where everybody is. And again, we have to keep in mind in New York City, as far as prices go for real estate, before the pandemic, we were already in a price correction, and we were doing very well. The market was fluid, and we were correcting. And so now I do expect there'll be a further correction as this all untangles. In some places, it depends. And when there's oversupply, people are going to have to adjust their prices because we know not all square feet are created equally. Depends on what's available.
So, Bess,
so we'll have to see.
Yeah, let's talk about the concern about maybe a intermediate or longer-term exodus from New York City. I live here in North Jersey, and the real estate market, particularly on the high end, is really, really heated up as New Yorkers look to get out of the city for various reasons, pandemic-related. What's your longer-term view of New York? Some folks are suggesting this is the beginning of a very dark period for New York real estate.
I'll be honest. I do have my concerns. We had been facing headwinds when it came to all this legislation in Albany before this pandemic hit. I'm sure the SALT deduction, the cap was an issue. The push up in the mansion tax, and now there's this looming pied-à-terre tax. That's pushed a lot of New Yorkers out already. And so now you have the pandemic, which is kind of a big bowl of bad for New Yorkers. But do I think everybody's going to leave and it's going to be a mass exodus? I don't have a crystal ball. I don't believe so. I think quality of life matters to people. And New York City is a place where people just want to live because of the culture and the theater and the food. We know what New York City is about. It is the greatest city in the world. So I do think some people may leave for a period of time. But I don't see it like the 70s where there was this like white flight out of the city. I think we'll have a little bit of a mixed bag. Some people will leave, some people will come back, some people may want to double down here like me, and stay here and, and wait while the city gets back together. But we are facing headwinds. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We have a lot of issues that we're trying to grapple with.
So the amount of high-rises that get built in New York is quite phenomenal. And, in many cases, the number of apartments per floor is pretty massive. So you see these huge numbers of people in buildings. Will that continue, Bess, or will developers have to figure out new ways of spacing people out?
I mean, it's a question mark. I mean, I think people may gravitate towards maybe living in buildings that have less people in it for a time. But maybe some developers will start to build buildings that have less people on the floor, but I think it's going to be hard to do that. I don't know if the economics will make sense. And what are you asking price per square foot if you only have 15 units in a building? Just the cost of building and land in New York City, it all has to make sense for people. So I don't know if they're going to reinvent that. They may look at things differently. They may set up the space differently and make sure people have enough, maybe have outdoor space or have home offices and the things that people are looking for. But I don't know if they're going to rejigger how they're building buildings. That's a question, that we'll see as we go down the line with the pandemic. I don't know. It's a good question, though, and interesting.
Bess, how about the international buyer? On the margin over the last 10 years, the international buyers really pushed the high end of the New York real estate market up. As I looked down, when I was in our Bloomberg office, looked down 57th Street, we'd see all these just ridiculously tall towers that just stick out of nowhere and are blight on the skyline, in my personal opinion. My understanding was a lot of international buyers were supporting those types of buildings. Where is the international buyer today?
Yeah, we call that's been called Billionaires Row, just so you know.
Yep.
The international buyers, we're not seeing a lot of that. The only thing I have heard of recently was early on when the pandemic hit, there was an investor from South America that bought a block of units at a project on the West Side, sight unseen. Other than that, I have heard very little about any international buyers in New York City. I think that's dried up a bit, and I wonder, when that will that come back and when. But the majority of projects, if you ask developers, typically they say 20% of the people that bought were international, and the rest were domestic. So, but I do think that's very quiet right now, and I think it's a real point to consider.
Bess, where are your popular areas right now in New York City and just more generally the tri-state area?
I would say we're seeing a lot of the West Side is very busy. Downtown is always a place where I spoke to an agent yesterday who's in a bidding war on something downtown. That's not I've heard a few different agents tell me that they're, in bidding wars with stuff in downtown areas. So I think it's a mix. There's a lot of opportunities. So people are trying to take advantage of that.
Bess,
and then, yes.
I'm going to actually jump in and thank you so much for speaking with us today. Phenomenal intelligence there from Bess Friedman and Brown Harris Stevens. We do want to go now, though, to the Coronavirus Task Force and Vice President Mike Pence.
And reopen America's schools. As you will hear today from Admiral Brett Giroir, at this point we have tested more than 39 million Americans. Among those, more than 3 million Americans have tested positive, and more than 1.3 million Americans have recovered. Sadly, more than 133,000 Americans have lost their lives, and our sympathies are with all of the impacted families. And while we mourn with those who mourn, because of what the American people have done, because of the extraordinary work of our healthcare workers around the country, we are encouraged that the average fatality rate continues to be low and steady. And at days earlier this week was actually 90% lower than at the height of this pandemic. Again, it's a credit to the sacrifices the American people have made, that the extraordinary work that our healthcare workers are doing. And we pledge this task force, working in partnership with governors all across the country, is going to continue to work our hearts out 24 hours a day to continue to keep our losses low. In just a few moments, Dr. Deborah Birx will outline the data that we're seeing around the country. We're tracking literally state by state, county by county. But as she will describe in a moment, we're actually seeing early indications of a percent of positive testing flattening in Arizona and Florida and Texas. Governors in each of those states have taken strong steps to flatten the curve. And again, as Dr. Birx will describe, we're beginning to see early indications that positivity is flattening. And in Arizona and Florida, we are beginning to see declining numbers of emergency room visits as well. We believe the takeaway from this for every American, particularly in those states that are impacted, is keep doing what you're doing, because we're starting to see the first indications that, as we were able to do in the Northeast, as we were able to do in New Orleans and Louisiana and Michigan and other places around the country, we're putting into practice those mitigation efforts, and we're beginning to see indications that they are having a good effect. We are focused on the states where more than half of the new cases have arisen: Texas, Arizona, Florida, and California, and have received encouraging reports even through this morning. Strong supplies of PPE in hospitals. Hospital capacity remains strong. The one need that we did hear from governors across the region is for personnel. And over the last week, working through FEMA, the Department of Defense, and HHS, we've been processing requests to deploy over 1,070 doctors and nurses and medical personnel. At this point, roughly 525 doctors and nurses are on the ground in Arizona, California, and Texas. And we're processing a request from Florida for an additional amount. We've made it very clear, as we, if you'll recall, we deployed at the President's direction active duty military medical personnel to New York, to New Jersey, to Connecticut, to Michigan, to Louisiana, and we're in the process of doing that again, just to make sure that that those dedicated doctors and nurses and healthcare workers have the relief that they need as we see cases rising in various communities across the Sun Belt, and we'll continue to work that. We had a conference call yesterday with the nation's governors. We are in the process of continuing to send every week detailed county-by-county summaries, analysis, and recommendations to governors that are being implemented and well received. We also are issuing renewed guidance on preservation and reuse of PPE. Again, what we're hearing, and not just speaking to governors, but talking directly to hospitals, is that, frankly, because of the historic effort that President Trump implemented to spin up hundreds of millions of supplies of gloves and masks and face shields, and as well as the construction of ventilators. We now have 59,000 ventilators in our supplies. PPE, we hear, remains very strong, but we're encouraging healthcare workers to begin now to use some of the best practices that we learned in other parts of the country to preserve and to reuse the PPE supplies. So our focus is to make sure our states have everything they need when they need it, and we're working closely with all the governors to make that a reality. But what brings us to the Department of Education is as we see to the needs of our states and we focus on the health care of the American people, we're working to reopen America and to reopen America's schools. And yesterday, President Trump convened a summit of education leaders and health officials at the White House. And as the president made clear yesterday, it's time. It's time for us to get our kids back to school. And the summit yesterday gave us an opportunity to outline and to learn what we might be able to do that. In just a few moments, I'm going to ask Secretary DeVos to talk about the approach the Department of Education is taking to assisting local communities and states in bringing their schools back online. And also we'll hear from Dr. Bob Redfield, who has been literally since early in this pandemic providing guidance to schools, and will be issuing additional guidance next week. I wouldn't want to pass the opportunity, though, not just as vice president, but as someone who's been married to a school teacher now for 35 years, just to say thank you to all the teachers out there. From early in this pandemic, teachers learned how to do the distance teaching and did a remarkable job, oftentimes having to care for their own families and make sure their own children's studies were happening. So to all of our America's teachers, we say thank you. We also want to say thank you to the parents who had to step in and become educators for all of their kids. It's really been remarkable when you see what our kids have been able to accomplish during this difficult time. But what we heard again yesterday from education officials and what we heard from the American Academy of Pediatrics, it's absolutely essential that we get our kids back into classroom for in-person learning. We can't let our kids fall behind academically, but it's important that the American people remember that for children that have mental health issues, for special needs children, for nutrition, for children in communities facing persistent poverty, the school is the place where they receive all those services. And so this is not just simply about making sure our kids are learning and they're advancing academically, but for their mental health, for their well-being, for their physical health, for nutrition. We got to get our kids back to school. And as you heard the president yesterday, and even again this morning, we're absolutely determined to work in partnership with our states to give the guidance for states and communities to be able to safely reopen our schools. The CDC will be issuing new guidance next week, part of a 5-part series of recommendations that will give all new tools to our schools. But what Dr. Redfield made clear yesterday, I'm sure he'll make clear again today, is we're here to help. We don't want federal guidance to be a substitute for state and local laws and rules and guidance. We're here to assist with the shared objective that I think is shared by every parent in America, which is we want to get our kids back. We want to get them back in the classroom. We want to get our teachers back in the front of those classrooms. We got to get our kids learning in person once again. As Congress is still in recess, but will gather again soon, we already are in discussions about additional potential support, although we were able to remind governors that $13.3 billion is available in the CARES Act for states to be able to assist them as they roll out and restart schools across the country. At the present moment, we learned yesterday that only 1.5% of those funds has been drawn down by states, and we encouraged governors to take advantage of that. Our objectives, as I said, are to save lives, meet the needs of our states and their healthcare workers, protect the most vulnerable, and safely reopen America and safely reopen our schools. And the good news is we are reopening America. The jobs report last Thursday spoke for itself, nearly 5 million jobs created. And I can tell you, evidence all around the country is that the American people are finding a way to do their part, to put the health of their neighbors first, even while we all find a way to get back to work, to worship, and to school. And we all have a role to play to slow the spread, to protect the most vulnerable, and to safely reopen our country and our schools. And so I would just close before I turn the podium over to Dr. Birx for her report, just simply to say thank you to the American people. Thank you for what you've done so far. Thank you for the way you've put the health and well-being of not just family members and friends, but strangers, people you didn't even know first. And we just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Keep heeding the guidance of state and local authorities. Practice good hygiene. Wash your hands. Wear a mask wherever state and local authorities determine it's indicated, or wear a mask where you can't engage in social distancing. This is the role each of us can continue to play, and we're seeing some early indications in some of the most impacted states that Americans are doing just that. So we want to encourage you on and tell you that we're going to continue to do our part. And I'm just absolutely confident, just as we proved when this pandemic was striking so deeply in the Northeast, when it was striking in the Louisiana and in Michigan. The American people know what needs to be done, and we know we can do it. And we flattened the curve before. We slowed the spread before, and we can do it again. But we've got to all do our part, and we'll do it together. With that, Dr. Deborah Birx, and then we'll get a report from Admiral Giroir before we move on to other reports. Dr. Birx.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. If I could have the first slide, please. And I know some of you do watch what I wear, so I'm wearing this specially today. This came from the Salt River Tribe. I just want to, mask can be a fashion statement. And I want to thank the Salt River Tribe. It was a real pleasure to be out and speaking to individuals around the United States about the issues that they're facing with COVID-19, to be able to meet with communities, hospital personnel, African-American communities, Hispanic communities, and our Pride tribal nations. That orange line is the number of tests performed, and the blue line is the test positivity. Now, this is at the level of the state. And Arizona does have 3 counties that we're tracking very closely. Obviously, you know, the largest one being Phoenix and Maricopa County. But this does show that the blue line, which is a 7-day average, and thank you to the data team for these wonderful slides, the 7-day average is showing some flattening, and then we find that encouraging. Also equally encouraging at this point, because we know that the test positivity rate is the first thing to increase, and we're hoping that it heralds a stability in Arizona of at least reaching a plateau in their curve. The red line represents the emergency room visits for any of the COVID-like symptoms, and this is also an early indicator, and we find that encouraging. The next slide does show the counties that we're tracking, obviously the largest county being Maricopa County with the largest number of infections, but clearly there's issues in Yuma and Pima. The Vice President mentioned the weekly reports that go to governors. This is what the report looks like. Of course, they're full-side pages. This is Alaska's. On the front page is our interpretation of what we're seeing relevant to their epidemic, with specific recommendations related to where we see them as far as being in a danger zone. They are coded by yellow and red. And it follows that they see everything you're seeing on that first report in boxes, warning boxes, and then each of the counties are represented so that they have in one place 5 pages from the White House and task force that summarizes what we're seeing, and that goes out weekly. Next slide, please. This looks at Florida, and you can see in the same way, the red line, early suggestions of decreasing emergency room visits for the symptoms of COVID, and some stability starting in that blue line, hoping that heralds a stability in the number of daily reported cases. We also understand that we went through a holiday weekend, and holiday weekends can impact data on both ends, under-reporting through the weekend, and then catch-up reporting on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday after holiday weekend. Next slide. This shows the counties of Florida that we're tracking. These are the top 10 counties in Florida, and you can see each of them have a different profile. I want to call your attention to the counties that are across the bottom there that are more difficult to see. Some of those represent Jacksonville and other large metros, including Tampa. When the governor talks about how they were steady and low for a long period of time after reopening, this is where that is reflected for almost 5 weeks after reopening. Clearly, there was something that happened, though, and those that we're looking into across the board, because whatever happened in Florida happened across the Sun Belt, and that all of the curves and all of the findings are mirrored. If you remember early on in March and April, we were talking about first the New York Metro, followed by Boston, followed by Philadelphia, then Chicago. And New Orleans was with the New York Metro. And so it was a series.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 metres apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 metre. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Formula One is back.
F1 is back on Sky Sports.
It's lights out, and away we go.
And there's never been a season like this before.
How was that fast?
No one knows where this road leads, but it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Down the inside, no, he can't stop into each other.
Are you ready?
Brilliant madness. An absolutely perfect race.
Watch every race live. Upgrade to Sky Sports F1 today. Go to sky.com/F1 for details.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races. To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Outdoor gatherings, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Participate in events like these infrequently. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Come on the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. From New York to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, this is Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. I'm David Weston. We start again today with a report on the markets. For that, we turn to Kaylee Lyons. So, Kaylee, not a lot of conviction, but NASDAQ seems to keep tearing on up.
Yeah, that is absolutely right, David. We've actually seen the S&P 500 flip between positive and negative territory. Right now, it's up just a few tenths of 1%. The Dow is basically flat. But once again, as you alluded to, it is a tale of tech outperformance. The NASDAQ far and away the outperformer on the session. It's up about 0.8%. This index just continues to climb higher. And David, of course, that is thanks largely to the heavyweights within it. I'm thinking the big five stocks, the Apples, Microsofts, Facebook of the world that continue to just power this equity market higher. It seems investors really just seem to be favoring these names over any others, given the fact that they are high growth, that they have strong balance sheets, can weather any kind of economic downturn, and of course, the fact that they have services and products in which are more demand in a stay-at-home world as we continue to see virus cases climbing. Johns Hopkins University saying just moments ago we have now hit 3 million in the U.S. And that's reflected in the sector composition in the equity market as well today, David. We see that it is technology, of course, outperforming up a full 1 percentage point. Well, at the bottom, it is those more cyclical, growth-sensitive sectors, industrials, energy, materials are all lagging very hard in today's session, David.
Yeah, which takes us really back to the coronavirus, as you suggest, Kay. That makes sense. At the same time, gold has been climbing pretty steadily. Where's the dollar?
The dollar is actually weaker today. It's interesting. We're getting kind of mixed messages from each of these asset classes in that usually a weaker dollar indicates more risk appetite, more confidence about growth. But you aren't seeing that reflected in gold. As you alluded to, gold is now at its highest since 2011, so 9 years. It's above $1,800 an ounce. We see ETF holdings in gold, for example, at record highs. So clearly there is still appetite on the part of investors to hedge some kind of risk here, even if the markets are moving higher because big tech is carrying us, David.
And at the same time, the VIX is relatively modest considering where it was before. The VIX is not indicating a lot of volatility.
Yeah, we're right around a 29 handle today, but it is all relative when we talk about volatility. Yes, we're not at an 82 like we saw back in March, but we are still elevated relative to history. Right now, the VIX would indicate that we're expecting swings of nearly 2% daily for a month on the S&P 500. Again, not March, where we were implying that the market was going to swing 5% a day. Wasn't all too out of the question then. Today, the market isn't seen as swinging that much, but again, relative to history, that is still quite elevated. That fear gauge is still a lot higher than it has been historically, David.
Okay, Kaylee, thank you so very much for that report on the markets today. That's Kaylee Lyons, one of our colleagues here. Meantime, let's go back to that subject of the coronavirus and how states are really fighting against it. We're very pleased to welcome now back to Bloomberg Ned Lamont. He is the governor of the state of Connecticut. So, Governor, thank you very much for being with us. I mean, it's a good day, I think, for you to come on because last time I saw you reported 0 fatalities for the first time since March. At the same time, you've postponed indefinitely the Phase 3 reopening. Why the caution when the numbers seem to be doing so well for Connecticut right now?
Nice to see you, David. We've got about 95% of our economy open right now. But when it came to bars and nightclubs and big entertainment venues, I listened to governors from Florida and Texas and the such saying they regret that they did open their bars when they did. And that was an opportunity for some super spreading to go on. We don't want that to happen. So, in abundance of caution, we're not going to open them yet.
Well, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as I recall, which makes good sense. How concerned are you about people outside of Connecticut? Certainly some surrounding states, even New Jersey now seems to be ticking back up, but certainly in the South and the Southwest, there are concerns about people coming from those locations into the states up here in the Northeast. How concerned are you about that? I know you have a quarantine in place. Is that advisory, or can you enforce that?
I'm very concerned. Thankfully, we got good neighbors. Massachusetts, New York, Rhode Island, they have low infection rates. But you're right. If people are flying up from Miami, flying up from Houston, coming in unchecked, that's a problem. You need 1 or 2 people infected on that flight. By the time it lands, who knows what's going to happen. So we do have a quarantine in place. It is voluntary. That is true. But I'll tell you, the number of people flying into our state from those infected areas has dropped quite a bit, which is the precaution we wanted.
Governor, where are you in masks? I mean, some people are going to like mandatory masks now. Where are you in Connecticut and you as governor of Connecticut?
Yeah, we have said for indoor use, for stores and the such, you have to wear the mask. That's the rule. And I was sort of interested, David, reading today that the National Retail Association said, I'm tired of having 50 different rules for when it comes to masks. Have a national standard, say masks are required inside the stores. That would make our lives a lot easier. That's the National Retail Association.
And most public health officials agree that that's one of the things that we could do to really save lives, save people from infection, but even save people's lives. So what's the hesitancy? Have you talked with federal officials about the possibility of a federal standard on this?
They're reluctant to have federal guidance on things like that. You've got to ask them. The messaging coming from Washington has been a little confusing for us. That's why we as governors here in the Northeast like to speak with one voice so we could have a consistent message.
One of the things we've heard a lot about is certainly testing, but contact tracing as well. I saw a report having to do with Connecticut that suggests you could reach out to 97% of the people who are infected, but only 47% would agree to participate in the contact tracing. Is that a problem for the contact tracing to really be effective?
That is a problem. We now have the infrastructure in place. As you point out, we can reach out to just about everybody in a real time. We do it by telephone. We do it by text. We try and say, look, if you care about the family, you care about the friends, the people you've been in contact with, please let us know who they are. But there is some hesitancy out there. Young people are at the party, don't want other people to know who was at the party, that type of thing. And we're working with the communities to impress upon people how important it is you share this information.
What is your policy at this point on the schools reopening? This is certainly something President Trump has focused on. Yesterday, he really said he was going to urge governors like you to make sure you open your schools. We had Vice President Pence out again today. At the same time, we had Mayor de Blasio here in New York City saying, if we do this, it's going to be like 2 or 3 days a week kids can go to school. Where are you in Connecticut?
Because we have an infection rate less than 1%, because we're meeting all the metrics, we are planning to open our schools on time in late August, September, a normal school day, so there's not a lot of back and forth, some days on, some days off. I think that's better for the kids and certainly for the employers and getting our economy going again. They like to know what the work schedule is of the people who are working for them.
Are you going to test employees, at least if not students, before they go back?
Right now, that's not the CDC guidance, but we do have 160 testing centers. They're available free of charge, symptomatic or non-symptomatic. So for those teachers that want to be tested, we're going to make sure they have that opportunity.
Governor Lamont, we all hope this goes beautifully for Connecticut and for the rest of us, for that matter. At the same time, do you have contingency plans? Do you have contingency plans that you could cut back again, in some schools at least, if there are problems, and go to a remote learning?
I'm afraid we do, David. I mean, we've seen how fast this flare-up can spread like wildfire, looking at other states. So we have told K through 12, make sure we have a contingency plan, and in particular our colleges. I mean, they're thinking hard about how they might have to move back to online learning if, in fact, there is a flare-up in the residence halls and the such. I think it's terrible, by the way, that you're not going to let foreign students attend our great universities here in Connecticut if it involves distance learning. That sends the wrong message, and that's coming right out of Washington.
Well, as you suggest, Governor, you have some pretty big, important universities there in the state of Connecticut. How are they doing? What's going to happen to them financially, given what's happening right now? Because you have both increased costs and perhaps reduced revenue.
They're losing money in the residence halls in particular, where they can't be at full occupancy to maintain some distancing there. But right now, I believe all of our colleges, public and private, are getting going in August. They're going to start with some distance learning to get people up to speed, move people into the dorms slowly, maybe over 2 or 3 weeks, so there's not a mad rush going in there. And they plan to have a mix of online as well as in-person classes, knowing that they may have to take a turn if there was a flare-up.
Governor, when you were last with us, you said that you thought perhaps the days of the routine 5-day-a-week commute from Connecticut into Manhattan may be over. What changes in patterns have you seen since then? Has that reinforced your view, or do you have a somewhat different view?
No, David, it really has reinforced our view, especially in southern Connecticut, where a lot of people would get on the train, then they get on the subway. there's a lot of reluctance about getting on the train, a lot of reluctance about getting on the subway. And I think people have found that you can have a nice suburban lifestyle, or maybe live in one of our small towns or Stamford, Connecticut. You can work out of there 2 or 3 days a week, and if you have to get into the Big Apple to take care of business, you could do that, but you don't have to live there.
What longer-term changes besides the commuting issue you just raised are you taking a look at right now? I'll give you another example. There are a lot of reports of people in Manhattan looking for houses up in Greenwich, up in southern Connecticut, and out in New Jersey. And what's going on with the real estate market right now?
The real estate market is very, very busy. People coming from New York, people coming from Boston. I think if they feel like this may not be the end of the end when it comes to the nature of self-quarantining, if you have a house with a little backyard, or you can get a couple of extra rooms at less cost than perhaps Brooklyn, it's a pretty good place to be. So I think you're going to see a dynamic change. Let's face it, for the last 20 years, young people wanted to be in the major metro centers. Now I think there'll be a little balancing out.
Well, Adam Smith would say that when there's increased demand, the price is going to go up. Are you seeing home real estate prices go up in Connecticut?
I think you are seeing some of that. Yeah, we've been pretty flat, as you know, for the last 15 years. So there's still a steep discount for Connecticut compared to New York City, for example. But you're right. There's a lot of demand, and I think you're going to see that reflected in prices.
So, Governor, let's talk about what, if anything, the state of Connecticut needs from the federal government. There's talk about another phase of stimulus or investment, shoring up the economy coming perhaps later this month. You've said you don't think necessarily we should be extending that $600 supplemental unemployment insurance claim. Why is that?
I'm trying to do everything I can to get people back to work safely. That's how we're going to get our economy going again. That's how I'm going to stabilize finances in our state. So I thought, look, there are other ways you can use those federal dollars rather than just true up the unemployment. For example, we've lost hundreds of millions of dollars just because not just our income tax revenue, but our sales tax revenue is down a lot due to COVID-enforced restrictions. And we've got to be prepared for that. Thankfully, we have a big rainy day fund, so we can power through for the near term. But if this lingers on for another year, we're all in big trouble. So I really need the federal government to step up and help out the state and local governments and give us more guidance on education as well.
So it's great that you have a rainy day fund. It'll tide you over for a little bit. When does it really start hitting you? If you don't get some direct support from the federal government for the Connecticut budget, when do you start having to cut costs? And let's be frank, that's often laying off people.
Well, we're already trimming. There's no question about that in anticipation. I think Connecticut's in good shape through this calendar year, maybe a little beyond that, depending on what the balance is. We're assuming as our economy gets back towards normal or close to normal by the end of this calendar year, well, Connecticut will be in good shape. If this falls over, if there's another big flare-up in November, we'll see what happens.
Governor, obviously this pandemic and the economic problems that have followed the pandemic are a big crisis. We also have had a crisis in this country having to do with systemic racism following the heels of that tragic killing of George Floyd. Tell us what is going on in Connecticut. I understand you may be calling the General Assembly into special session to address some of at least the policing issues.
We're definitely going to do a police accountability bill as part of our special session in the next couple of weeks. We tried to lead by example with our state police and make sure that when it came to community policing, take out the militarization, focus on the community policing. And I was really pleased that during some really important protests in and around the George Floyd murder, our state police were also often arm in arm with the protesters. We had very few arrests, very little violence. And for that, I was thankful that the police and the protesters were, in many cases, aligned, at least in terms of their goals.
What about the more fundamental underlying issues, besides the policing of some of the inequality, economic inequality, income and wealth, that we have across the entire country? You also have a version of it in Connecticut. What can we do to address some of those issues that really set up perhaps the police and the police for failure?
two big focuses for me in our state is, one, education. We have one of the biggest achievement gaps between extraordinary suburban schools and some of our city schools that we've got to make investments in. We need more social workers. We need more social support, as well as STEM and coding. So we're making a big effort to upgrade those opportunities there for each and every one of those kids, especially the ones in the cities. And secondly, we put a lot of money into new business startups, especially for, people of color, making sure they get that opportunity. We have a $45 million fund. I think 38% of it went right to people of color to make sure they can power through and start up their business and achieve their dreams.
Yeah, fascinating. Finally, Governor, let me ask you about voting come November. We've got a big election coming up. What's the situation in Connecticut with respect to absentee voting, mail-in voting? It's a big controversial subject, as you know, across the country.
Why is it so controversial? The majority of states do it. Red states, blue states is not particularly partisan. Obviously, in this environment, everything is getting partisan. In our state, look, I'm telling people over the age of 60, I'm telling people with pre-existing conditions, stay safe, stay home. And that means we got a primary in August. That means we have an election in November. And I want to make sure they can exercise their rights through absentee balloting. So we've got a little push and pull on that, but I think we're going to get that passed.
And do you need something through the General Assembly to get that done? And if so, when does it get enacted so people know how they're going to be able to vote?
Yeah, I have emergency powers, so I can do it for August. But when it comes to the November election, I need the legislature to step up and say, if you feel like you have some health risk, you don't have to go wait in a long line at a voting booth. We'll do absentee balloting for you, no questions asked. And I noticed that the CDC just recommended the same. That's good news.
So, Governor, I told you finally I'm going to fib to you now because we got a question from a viewer that I really want to ask you. One of the viewers wrote in and said, how's your pension system doing up in Connecticut?
We need some work there. There's no question about it. The politicians made big promises, didn't put money into the pension for 40 years. And we have an unfunded liability. That said, we're pushing through some reforms. We have a fair number of people that are going to be retiring in the next year or so. And we're managing it. The main thing I'm trying to do is hold down the increase in costs so our fixed costs become a smaller and smaller piece of our budget over the coming years.
Okay, Governor, it's a great pleasure to talk with you. Thank you for so much of your time. That's Governor Ned Lamont. He is governor of the state of Connecticut. And this is Bloomberg.
It's the people with experience who make the difference between...
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Like right now? Get your cook on later with Asda. Get 3 for £3 on snacks like a 5-pack of Cathedral City nibbles and Dairyly Lunchables. Peckish anyone? Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Lunchables 63 grams to 83.4 grams. Prices £1.50 to £1.55. Offers end 22nd of July.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Sponsored by SEI. Crises bring out the best in people, character, community, partnership, together as one. SEI. Go to SEIC.com/IMS. Stocks trade mixed amid tensions between Washington and Beijing and an uncertain outlook for economic recovery. Tech shares outperform. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. The S&P 500 is up 0.3%, up 10. The Dow's up 0.25%, up 59, and the Nasdaq's up 0.9%, up 95. The 10-year is down 7/30 seconds with a yield of 0.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.4% at $40.78 a barrel. COMEX gold is at $18.2340 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.33. The euro $1.1347, and the British pound $1.2601. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. Now more Balance of Power with David Weston right here on Bloomberg Radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for Bloomberg First Word News. For that, we go to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. A grim milestone here in the United States. According to data compiled by Johns Hopkins University, the number of confirmed coronavirus cases in the United States has topped 3 million. More than 131,000 Americans have died. The U.S. accounts for more than a quarter of all COVID-19 cases globally. President Trump is speaking out against the CDC. In a tweet, the president said he disagrees with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's, quote, very tough and expensive guidelines for opening schools. He added the CDC is asking schools to do, quote, very impractical things. The president has threatened to cut funding to schools if they don't open before the November election. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro says he's confident that he will quickly recover from the coronavirus thanks to treatment with hydroxychloroquine. On Tuesday, President Bolsonaro said he had tested positive for the virus. He's been downplaying the severity of the illness for months, while deaths in Brazil soar. He said today his fever had subsided, something he attributed to hydroxychloroquine. The drug has not been proven effective against COVID-19. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch...
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that.
Or an afternoon in a pub garden? Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable, the lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda. The power of dreams.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. It's time now for a market check. And for that, we go to our colleague Scarlett Fu. So, Scarlett, tech is really on a tear today.
It certainly is. You look at the NASDAQ 100 and the NASDAQ Composite, they are at record highs. They've come back from their best levels of the session. And indeed, the S&P 500 has pulled back as well. But that is the bright spot in markets across different asset classes. Still, when you look at the different asset classes, it definitely feels like there's a note of caution in the air. The dollar is lower versus all the G10 currencies. We see gold prices above $1,800 an ounce, really a showcase for the fact that there's still a lot of demand for safe havens. I want to focus in on technology, though, because the mega cap tech names have really been driving the advances, and we're seeing names like Amazon, like Apple, like Facebook, all at record highs today, and that's been the trend for a while now.
Yeah, the interesting thing to me, Scarlett, there was a time not too long ago when the tech names really went up or down based on our relations with China because of trade concerns. Those have entirely gone by the way. Now it feels like at least people are saying, let's bet on tech because even if the coronavirus comes back, we'll still need tech.
Yeah, absolutely. Tech has become kind of a safe haven. I mean, it's a barbell strategy. It's both growth and safe haven because of their strong balance sheet, their cash hoard, and, of course, that undiminished demand for their products and services, and has held up so well during this pandemic and during this lockdown. When I look at the S&P 500's 24 industry groups, there are 3 tech subsectors that are among the 6 best performers. You've got software, you've also got hardware, and you've got semiconductors as well. And I bring this up because NVIDIA is now the biggest U.S. chip maker. It has soared past Intel in terms of market cap. NVIDIA higher for a 7th straight day. There's no real specific catalyst for today, but we know that there's been growing demand for NVIDIA's graphics chips in data centers and in AI, whereas Intel has been a little bit more reliant on PCs, its main source of business. And now with NVIDIA's recent advance, it is now the 3rd biggest chip maker in the world after TSMC of Taiwan and Samsung Electronics of Korea. David?
That's fascinating. I didn't know that about NVIDIA. That's fascinating, Scarlett. Thank you so much. That's our colleague Scarlett Fu reporting on the markets today. In the meantime, coming up next here, we're going to talk to Rufus Yerxa of the National Foreign Trade Council. We can talk about the USMCA, trade with China, and also, oh, by the way, a need for a new head of the WTO, somewhere where Rufus used to work, so he knows terribly well. Can they get it done by August when Mr. Acevedo steps down? That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are modestly higher, lifted by tech companies. The Dow is up 14 points, NASDAQ up 86, S&P 500 up 6. Well, people who wear suits to the office aren't going to the office or buying more suits. So Brooks Brothers has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Meanwhile, the owner of Ann Taylor and Lane Bryant is planning to close at least 1,200 stores. Bloomberg News reports Ascena Retail Group could file for Chapter 11 as soon as this week. There's a big merger in the insurance world. Allstate is going to buy National General for about $4 billion in cash. The deal will allow Allstate to expand in its personal insurance. And mortgage giant Quicken Loans has filed paperwork to go public under the name Rocket Companies. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
How long will it take for the economy to recover?
How many of them have remained on the job throughout this?
People are not going to be in public transportation.
Nobody knows.
You have received £600 million from the UK.
But we can promise the most complete information and the most detailed analysis.
The question is, what kind of recovery will it be?
Through every twist and turn.
Would you be wary of investment in China at this point?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. The president of Mexico is arriving at the White House today as the USMCA, that successor agreement to NAFTA, goes into effect. We welcome now Rufus Yerxa. He is the president of the National Foreign Trade Council. Earlier, he served in, among other positions, as the deputy director general of the World Trade Organization. Rufus, great to have you back with us. Let's spend a minute or two on USMCA. It's finally getting done. Is it going to make much of a real difference as a practical matter?
Yes, thank you, David. Good to be with you. Well, as a practical matter, it is important because it reduces uncertainty about whether this agreement, this whole North American trading relationship, which has been in existence now for 25 years, is going to change dramatically or continue. I mean, there are some marginal improvements in the USMCA, but I think the most important aspect of it is it increases the degree of certainty that we will keep an open North American economy. There's less risk now of a president or a Congress turning its back on this agreement, although there are still threats, as you know, even today on aluminum from the Trump administration to impose new restrictions. But I think it creates greater certainty. We're hopeful that it settles the situation. Won't make a dramatic difference in imports and exports or investments immediately. Over time, I think it'll strengthen North American trade.
So you anticipated a question beautifully, Rufus. Is it really going to create that much more certainty? Because as you say, the Trump administration has continued to threaten tariffs on aluminum. At the same time, you've got Senator Schumer, the minority leader in the Senate, saying, boy, this does not take care of the agricultural problems either. And President Trump has shown he's willing to impose tariffs no matter what the agreements are saying.
I think that's the biggest concern is how much will the Trump administration, abide by an agreement they just negotiated. The president has shown a penchant in the past for, imposing new restrictions, notwithstanding deals he's making. So, that becomes a question of trust between the partners. But I think there are limits to how much you can do that sort of thing if you want to, if you want to tout this agreement as something good and new, which the Trump administration wants to do. I mean, they want to use the political benefits of it, and they can't really turn their back on the agreement.
So Rufus, talk to us about your old organization, the World Trade Organization. You also, by the way, worked for the United States Trade Representative, but you worked for a good long time, I think 11 years at the WTO. It is about to be leaderless come August, with Mr. Azevedo having stepped down. There's a lot of contention. There was even before he announced he was stepping down. What are the prospects for getting somebody into leadership at the WTO in time?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge. There are a number of candidates that have already come forward. I think today is the last day for candidates announcing. I see that the UK is putting forward their former Trade Secretary Liam Fox. There's three candidates from Africa. There's a Korean. There's others around the world. So it will be a challenge. I think that the process in normal times, if Azevedo had stayed to the end of his term, the process would have taken about 9 months. Since he gave his announcement only in May, it's an abbreviated process, obviously, to September. But the real challenges aren't so much the process. You have to carry consultations and narrow it down to 2 finalists and then get a consensus on the final candidate. That's a challenge. But the bigger challenge, David, is the politics of it. How do you get U.S., China, European Union, other big players not to disagree with each other's choices? And, Ambassador Lighthizer, for example, has put some pretty strict conditions down and is saying the kind of candidate he'll accept, with a fundamental commitment to changing China's practices. That'll be hard for the Chinese to accept his candidate, and vice versa, probably. So I think maybe a lot of people will be looking to see if they want to delay this past the U.S. election.
Well, exactly. That's the question. Particularly for China, don't they have some incentive to just slow walk this, saying, you know what, there might be a different president effect, although it's not clear, given what is being said now by Democrats and Republicans, that whoever occupies the White House is going to go soft on China.
No, I don't think it's a question of whether they'll go soft on China. I think the Europeans as well, who, as you know, have had a number of points of friction with Trump, might say, well, you know, maybe we ought to wait a while and see how the U.S. election comes out. I think the calculation will be, if Trump gets reelected, we'll have to make our peace with him and we'll reach agreement on somebody. But if Biden gets elected, why would we want to be saddled with someone that, you know, we had to make a compromise with Trump to get? Maybe we'll get a better deal. I don't know what these countries are thinking, but certainly that might be part of their calculation. And we'll see. You know, there have been periods in the past where there was not a sitting director general and they have to appoint an acting one. There's a process for doing that. That might be the case now. And remember, the WTO isn't just the director general. Director general is actually not that strong a role in terms of powers. There is a chairman of the council that's appointed by the members. There are chairmen of the various committees. So the WTO keeps operating even if there's not a sitting director general.
All of which raises a question in my mind, at least, Rufus, is the WTO up to it, no matter who leads it, as a practical matter? Because when we come down to the two largest economies in the world having a fundamental difference about how you run your economy, the extent to which it's state-driven or not, is there any WTO that can really take on that fundamental an issue?
I've said to you so many times before, David, that, you know, the WTO system, like the GATT before it, is essentially a contractual relationship among major trading countries. And if the partners in that contract aren't agreeing with each other about things, there's very little a director general can do to alter the realities of a major breach between the partners. So the main role of a director general is try to figure out how to bring them together and create grounds for compromise between them. But that depends on the goodwill and the willingness of the countries to do it. My sense, particularly of the U.S.-China relationship, is at this particular point in the relationship, there's very little chance of, you know, them crafting a path forward together in the WTO. It's more likely they're going to have a number of disputes in the WTO. And so we're looking to the future. Over the next several years, can we get back to doing business with each other in the WTO? I think that's going to be the big challenge.
Okay, Rufus, as always, it's a treat to have you with us. Thank you so much. That's Rufus Yerkes. He is the president of the National Foreign Trade Council. And now it's time for First Word News, and for that we go to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you very much. New York City still plans to open public schools in September. Mayor Bill de Blasio said today he anticipates a blended learning program. Students would be in class 2 to 3 days a week, and families will have the option to choose all remote learning over in-school programming. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel is calling on the European Union to pull together to tackle the challenges stemming from the coronavirus pandemic and climate change. Chancellor Merkel took over the 6-month rotating EU presidency this month. The EU's member states are grappling with a proposed $845 billion recovery fund. The ambitious plan has met with resistance from a handful of member states who are concerned about the cost. Candidates from Britain and Saudi Arabia have entered the contest to become the next Director General of the World Trade Organization. As David and Rufus Yerkes were just discussing, they join 6 others aspiring to lead the Geneva-based trade body that has faced scorn and pressure from the Trump administration. The WTO's current chief, Brazil's Roberto Azevedo, made the surprise announcement in May that he would leave the job a year early. At the U.S. Supreme Court today, 2 key rulings involving religion. Justices upheld the Trump administration rule that lets employers use religious grounds to opt out of the requirement that they offer free birth control in their health plans. Meantime, the court also gave a victory to religious schools. Justices say the Constitution gives faith-based groups broad power to hire and fire employees who carry out important religious functions. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks very much, Mark. Coming up next, we're going to talk with former South Carolina Senator Jim DeMint on his new book, Saving America from Socialism. That's next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
False information about coronavirus is being spread everywhere. Popping up here, being shared there. Ping! Reaching and tricking more people with every share. They don't even understand the harm it can cause.
False information can be hard to spot. Make sure you know what you're sharing. Don't feed the beast. Visit sharechecklist.gov.uk. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams. This is a message from the RNLI and Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Beach lifeguards can't be everywhere this summer, so they can't always protect your family, but you can. So keep an eye on your loved ones. Avoid taking risks in the sea. Don't use inflatables. In an emergency, dial 999 for the Coast Guard. Get more advice at rnli.org/beach2020. Thank you.
This is Mike Golick from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Trey Wingo, my son, and I sit down to discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
Want to get all your college sports news in one place? Turn on the Yahoo Sports College podcast to hear experts Dan Wetzel, Pat Forty, and Pete Thamel break down the latest NCAA stories from the football field to the basketball court and beyond.
I think Reggie should do a video of him running to Heritage Hall and front flipping in. Remember that famous front flip in the end zone that he did? Wasn't he the one who made that popular?
I think he
was.
I think he was, yeah. Search Yahoo College Sports Podcast on TuneIn to listen.
How do hockey fans know what day it is? Just turn on the Locked on NHL podcast, where our rotating cast of hockey experts guide you through the week with a different theme show for every day. From big news Monday to recap Friday.
But we've got a couple of news items that are noteworthy in the NHL in the last week, one of which is below the NHL, and we'll bring that up first. So the AHL announced officially, this has been speculated for weeks and weeks, but the AHL...
Search Locked on NHL on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up in the Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brince's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession. To help keep you and your loved ones safe, TuneIn has the latest guidelines from the CDC. Outdoor gatherings? Wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay at least 6 feet from people you don't live with. Wear a mask. Don't share food, toys, or other items, and avoid shared surfaces. Participate in events like these infrequently. For the latest stories and updates on COVID-19, search Coronavirus News on TuneIn.
And so my issue is we cannot lock down the economy again. We can argue about what was done right or wrong in the first place, but to create worst-case scenarios as an excuse to shut down our government was a big problem. And I think what we've seen here, David, is a little glimpse of what happens when people who are in power use some crisis as an excuse to take control of our lives. If you sit down and think about it, for the last few months, we've had governors and mayors telling us whether we can open our business or not, which businesses are essential, who we can meet with, whether we can go to church, whether schools can open. I mean, this is a little glimpse of what it's like when we give government too much power. And I think what we've seen here is when folks, particularly those on the left, who have this excuse to take power, are more than willing to do it.
And certainly all of us don't want an overburdening government. We don't want to turn everything over to the government, which I really interpret as being socialism. But at the same time, when you have a virus that really crosses between people and goes around, don't you have to have some rules? Because the fact is, what you do in exercising your rights and your liberties might affect my well-being.
Yeah, exactly, and it's something we have to weigh. But I mean, there's little question now that we did overreact. I mean, we didn't know all the data in the beginning, but what worries me now is we have the data, particularly about school-age kids or kids in college. Very little risk of getting it, very little risk of being hospitalized, certainly very little risk of death. And we're still not responding properly on an economic perspective. What we're not doing, David, is balancing the risk. There could very well be, with all the spending and borrowing and printing of money, some economic failure point that we're not anticipating here. And I just don't think we can completely ignore the downside of closing down an economy and putting millions of people out of work. And we've had thousands, if not millions, of small businesses who've closed probably permanently. And so the damage here has got to be weighed. And we know the risk is primarily to folks over 80 who have very serious other health conditions. Most of who've died have been in nursing care. We need to take care of those, Dave, but we don't need to apply the same restrictions on young people because of elders. Now, that doesn't mean it's not simple. I mean, young people go visit older folks, but no one yet in the medical community has said, hey, if we stay home, we're not going to get it. They've told us from the beginning, you're likely to get it if you can get it, but we're just trying to delay it. The fact now is we've got plenty of hospital capacity. We know how to treat it better. The death rate is plummeting, although you don't hear about that. You just hear about infection rates. So I think there's been a lot of alarmists here, and I'm afraid most of it is just directed at the election.
Yeah, fascinating. It's a really interesting book, a very provocative book. And I'm delighted to say that the former senator from South Carolina, Jim DeMint, will be staying with us in the second hour of Balance Part to talk about it some more, apply it to some different situations we have right now in the United States of America. In the meantime, coming up here, we're going to talk with our editor-in-chief emeritus, Matt Winkler, for his take on the Trump economy. That's coming up on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Gathering world world-renowned experts takes effort.
We have the perfect person.
Asking them the right questions takes Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Is this possibly early indications of a second wave?
Bloomberg Business Week.
Silicon Valley will be forever changed by this pandemic. What's your take?
Are they paying off their balances?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern.
That is a significant shift.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
President Trump came to office promising we're going to have a robust and growing economy, but then the pandemic came along, which makes it almost impossible that the economy will be back on its feet by this November, at least, which requires him to have a second term or not deliver what he promised. In the meantime, Matt Winkler, our editor-in-chief emeritus at Bloomberg, has written a piece really evaluating the Trump economy, giving him sort of a report card, as it were, about why we're in the trouble we're in, and we welcome him now. Great to have you back with us, Matt. Basically, as I took it from your piece, if we have a bad economy, President Trump has some of the responsibility for that.
He does indeed, because healthy people in a healthy economy are inextricable. And from the moment we knew this was a global pandemic, which you could say was the beginning of the year, the Trump administration, led by President Trump himself, dismissed it out of hand. He said it would go away. He didn't in any way advocate any of the prerequisites for controlling or containing the coronavirus, such as masks, for example, contact tracing, social distancing. All of these things are very important to making sure we contain the virus. And instead what happened, he left it to the states. Some states did all the things that you should do, like New York, for example, Massachusetts, but other states didn't. And so this free-for-all created havoc, confusion, and now we are left 6 months into the year, starting the second half, with uncertainty and a resurgence of the virus. And we probably could have, like other countries, contained it by April had we followed a regime that was coordinated and led from the top, which is, of course, the federal government.
So accepting your analysis as you've laid it out. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was going to say, unfortunately, if you like, the punchline is massive unemployment that dwarfs unemployment anywhere else in the developed world. And there's no likelihood that we'll recover to anything close to what we had before, January. It just isn't possible to get there. So it's going to take years maybe for us to get back to the low level of unemployment that we had.
So taking all of that analysis you laid out for us, do you find some deep irony here? Because the president apparently was motivated in part to encourage people to come back in order to save the economy, because I think he may have been really worried about the economy and its suffering, and maybe that hurting him in re-election. Is there an irony here? Because he was trying to do the opposite.
Well, yeah, I suppose there's an irony, but
right in the middle of all that is his massive defiance of science. And the science and the scientists tell us we have to figure out a way to control the virus first before we get to the point where we can make the economy as robust as we'd like it to be. That's why I say they're inextricably linked. Those are the scientists, the doctors, the people who know the most about the subject talking to us. And Trump and, his enablers did just the opposite. They ignored the science and they ignored the scientists.
One of the things that President Trump says and people around him say is, look, the economy was in great shape before this. It's just that pandemic, nobody could predict a pandemic, couldn't really anticipate that. So it's not if you're President Trump, my fault. Does he have a point there that the economy was in pretty solid condition going into this?
Hey, Hong Kong was going through all kinds of political convulsions. And Hong Kong has a lot more experience dealing with pandemics, going all the way back, for example, to SARS at the beginning of this century. And Hong Kong's economy, for all the political turmoil that it's been put through, has performed so much better to the point where the coronavirus is insignificant. Now, why use Hong Kong? It's a very densely populated part of the world. So the people there know how to deal with this. Of course, they all know that masks are essential, and that's very different from the behavior of the United States. If you go to Germany, Angela Merkel really worked with all of the state governments in Germany and got a coordinated response. In France, Macron shut down the economy, and it is doing better now, recovering, than the U.S. is doing, because he also had a systematic approach to dealing with the crisis. The U.S. is the only place where there was not a systematic approach. It was chaos from the start, and unfortunately, it's still chaotic today.
So we have 4 months to go, roughly, to the election. Is it too late for the president to make a real difference in the economy at this point, given the fact that there seems to be a certain momentum to this disease? It lags what actually is going on.
David, you have far more astute political analysts talking to you every day on your show than yours truly. Having said that, I look at the polls just like you, and I don't think it's a coincidence that since the coronavirus became so virulent in the United States, that Trump's popularity, his approval rating has plummeted. And even, parts of his base seem to have peeled off a bit to the extent that, his numbers are atrocious right now, 6 months from the election. Does that have a lot to do with, the pandemic? I think it does. I think there's no question that people are reacting or responding to the lack of leadership dealing with this crisis.
Matt Winkler, thank you so much for being with us. He, of course, is Bloomberg Editor-in-Chief Emeritus. In the meantime, coming on the second hour of Balance of Power on radio, we're going to be talking with Mike Summers. He's the president of the American Petroleum Institute. That's continuing on Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Thailand's plan to target high-spending foreigners to kickstart its travel sector has a green light. The Southeast Asian nation lifted its near-total ban on foreign travelers July 1st, mostly allowing in foreigners with direct ties to Thailand, either business or family. Although a special arrangement dispensation widens the market for big spenders as the country pivots to focusing on wealthy visitors with private jets. Meanwhile, Bulgari Chief Executive Officer Jean-Christophe Babin said he expects the LVMH-owned jeweler to recover most of the sales it lost due to the COVID-19 pandemic over 2 years. Consumer recovery in China and South Korea has been, quote, beyond belief. In the Bloomberg TV interview, the CEO also said he's sticking to a plan to expand Bulgari's line of luxury hotels with further openings, including the first in the U.S. to be announced soon. LVMH's revenue from watches and jewelry suffered a 26% drop in the first quarter. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Working from home, take a little more time for breakfast. Tom Keene.
How will this pandemic change your NASDAQ?
Jonathan Farrow.
When you look at that sector, some of these companies won't exist, will they?
And Lisa Abramowitz.
They've only continued to increase the delinquencies and defaults.
Crunch data topped with fresh world news. Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. And now, watch us on Bloomberg Television.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Krisner. We're seeing positivity right now in the U.S. equity market, although the major benchmarks are off their best levels of the day. Tech shares continue to be the standout performers. We've got the NASDAQ composite right now up by nearly 1.1%. For the Dow Industrial Average, a gain of 0.2%. And in the broader market, we have the S&P 500 better by nearly 0.4%. And the active gold futures contract well above $1,800 an ounce. We'll talk more about what's happening in bonds momentarily. First, the market drivers report. And Dave Wilson. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Doug. Here to talk American depository receipts. ADRs are rising more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 0.6%, and the S&P 500 is higher by 0.4%. China's Alibaba Group holding has risen 8.1% in U.S. trading. Reuters reported that the online retailer's affiliate Ant Financial plans an initial public offering in Hong Kong as soon as this year. Now, Ant denied that story to the Global Times. Mexico's Grupo Televisa has gained 6.2%. The media company's second quarter earnings beat the highest analyst estimate in a Bloomberg survey. Finland's Nokia has dropped 3.5%. The phone equipment maker was cut to neutral from the equivalent of buy at J.P. Morgan, which said it may lose business from Verizon. Now, data compiled by Bloomberg shows the U.S. phone company has been Nokia's largest customer, accounting for about 8% of revenue. And India's Tata Motors has fallen 4.4%. Logistics company DHL International plans to cut about 2,200 workers at factories owned by the automaker's Jaguar Land Rover unit. DHL cited lower car production as a reason for the move, Doug.
All right, thanks to Bloomberg's Dave Wilson. So with this risk-on move that we're seeing in equities, long-term interest rates have pushed a bit higher, the 10-year Treasury right now with a yield of 66 basis points. You're caught up on market action. Let's get back to Balance of Power with David Weston.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
President Trump wants the schools open in September. A trifecta of adverse pipeline decisions put one of the president's other priorities in jeopardy. And federal and state governments continue to wrestle with their proper roles in fighting the pandemic. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Bloomberg Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. In times of crises, people tend to look to their government for help. And over this last 6 months, we've faced three crises at the same time. The pandemic, the recession, and the pandemic brought on, and civil unrest in the wake of that tragic killing in Minneapolis. Former Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina has a new book out on the role of government and the dangers in having too strong a government. It's called Saving America from Socialism, and Senator DeMint has remained with us from the first hour of Balance of Power. So, Senator, thank you so much for being with us. Let's talk about government and its proper role in something like a pandemic, a public health crisis, as opposed to an economic crisis. You are a big proponent of minimal government. At the same time, is there an important role for the government to play when we have something like a pandemic?
Well, yes, there is. I think the government is responsible for getting good information to the citizens. That's always part of freedom, is people can make the best decisions. And as you pointed out in the first hour, the government does have to have some balance when we go out. Maybe we're willing to risk our own health, but does that risk someone else? So the government has to arbitrate that. But we can't eliminate risk. And for the government to come in and say, okay, this is for your own good, we're going to take your rights away, this is something that Americans have got to be real careful about. And I think we've certainly seen the government overstep, particularly in many states, based on the health data that we have now.
And where did the overstepping come from in your experience? Is it telling people to wear masks? Is it shutting down businesses? Where do you think the biggest overstepping was?
Well, the biggest overstep was shutting down businesses. It was supposed to be for 2 weeks. And the whole promise there was, okay, we're going to give the healthcare industry time to catch up. We want to level the curve so that we don't just overrun our hospitals and our healthcare system. And we did that very quickly. In fact, there's been excess hospital capacity around the country to the point where hospitals are asking for bailouts because they weren't allowed to do other elective surgeries and things like that. But this is extended for 3 months, way out of proportion from the data that we got very early that this disease affects older folks, primarily over 80, in nursing homes with other health conditions. And it's important that we protect these people, but to require younger people to follow the same restrictions makes literally no sense, particularly now when we know that if you have less danger from the coronavirus if you're under 50 than you do from the flu. And we can't shut the government down every flu season.
Where do you come on things that are less intrusive than shutting your business down? Something like you have to wear a mask, at least if you're inside. You have to wear a mask. Is that something that's a personal liberty for you that you think the government should really be very reluctant to take away?
The government should be very reluctant to do that, particularly inside. I think if businesses want to require various safeguards, I think it's important to do that. But for someone, particularly at the federal level, to start saying that we need to be wearing a mask when some offices are more spread out, have private offices. But I just can't imagine sending people to work all day or to school all day and telling them they have to wear a mask when they could probably make better decisions voluntarily within that business or people making their own decisions themselves. My point, David, is the government should be very hesitant to create any mandate that interferes with the individual's right and to just operate in a normal fashion. So I'm not saying the government doesn't have any role, but mostly it's to keep providing good information so that people can make good decisions for themselves.
Senator, what do you make of the criticism, and I'm not an epidemiologist, so I'm not qualified on this, but the criticism that says the United States is really doing almost the worst in the world right now at containing this disease, and that part of the reason for that is we have let 1,000 flowers bloom, to mix metaphors, that we've let people have a lot more say, so that the countries that have been much more restrictive and much more uniform have done better in containing the disease. How do you react to that criticism?
Well, I don't think it's true. I mean, more people are coming to America than any other country. We've had people from all over the world. There's a spike in Texas, but a lot of it's right there on the southern border. New York has been our worst state, where most of our deaths, and that's where a lot of international travel lands. I think it really just depends on a lot of other things. But now I think, as the president says, we're doing a lot more testing than a lot of other countries. And as we test, we find out a much larger percent of the population has been infected. But that also tells us the death rate and the risk of from this disease is much, much lower than we thought in the beginning.
We're talking with former Senator Jim DeMint and really going through his new book called Saving America from Socialism. Let's apply your analysis to vaccines, both specifically with respect to the COVID-19. We all hope we're going to get a vaccine, but more broadly, it's been an issue in the country. How do you feel about the government requiring you to get a vaccine?
That's a tough question. I mean, a lot of parents are worried about vaccines. There has been some data that suggests some side effects for children that we should be concerned about. But I think when you're going into a public institution like a school, those officials there are going to have the right to say you cannot send your children here if they have not been immunized. Now, there's a lot of disagreement about that, and I have a lot of hesitation. But I think when it comes to a government facility like a public school, then there's certainly government has some discretion of saying whether or not children should be immunized, because in that case, as we've seen in some cases where parents don't have their children immunized, they come to school and actually give something to someone else.
I can't let you go without asking a political question, and specifically about President Trump. Are you pleased with how he's done in terms of the balance of the government versus individual rights and responsibilities, or do you think that he has fallen short of the mark? Because certainly the government hasn't shrunk under President Trump, has it?
No, actually, before the virus here, we had a shrinkage in the number of federal employees, and certainly there's been way too much spending, and the president never pretended that he was going to try to cut spending. He wanted to get the economy revved up, so he spent more money. I mean, I think he's done a great job. I think he got off his game a little bit with this coronavirus because he deferred to the health professionals until we kind of got a grip on what was going. And I got to give him credit for that, David. I mean, he was willing to give up his biggest accomplishment, which was the economy, in order to save lives. And so he talked about shutdown and lockdown and people being safe until we got enough data to decide that we could open back up. So I think on balance, he's done a great job, particularly if you like free market economics. He's taken down a lot of regulations and put a lot of emphasis on just our markets and our free market system. But David, I would just say one thing about you. Your title of this show is Balance of Power.
Right.
And the best balance of power we have against an intruding government is just a free economic system where you've got millions of people kind of making their own decisions about what they buy, what they sell, what they make. Yep. And that's why socialism is so dangerous. Right. If you let the government control that part of it, we lose that balance of power.
And that's the core of your new book. Thank you so much, former Senator Jim DeMint, author of Saving America from Socialism. Coming up next, might President Trump be suppressing his own vote? We're going to talk about that on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
Coronavirus proved that every aspect of our lives, from business to health, is connected to Asia.
Healthcare firms testing the appetite for IPOs in Hong Kong too.
But you already knew that.
COVID-19 certainly had an impact on this.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern.
What does that mean for Asia if the dollar remains on the back foot for the foreseeable future?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, Yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
Had to be independent and take initiative, and that's how I handle every project I get.
discovered new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
The best of Bloomberg Business Week every business day.
We've got a market sell-off that's spreading around the globe.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Let's do the Bloomberg Business Week bite of the day, Carol.
The day's breaking global business, finance, and tech news, along with smart analysis.
We know the Fed is going to be sure and steady.
The Bloomberg Business Week podcast.
A great scoop on the terminal.
Listen today on BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
COVID-19. On days when it seemed...
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
When you're buying tech online and you want to make sure you get exactly what you need, would you rather talk to a robot or to someone called Robert or Jack or Miguel or Haley or one of our other tech experts on Shop Live, Curry's PC World's online video call experience?
Hey, I'm Ali. How can I help?
Isn't it nice to get expert advice from another human being before you buy? They're just a click away. Curry's PC World. Talk to our tech experts online with Shop Live.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality, to make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Just one cornetto.
Ada, love, your mum's on the phone.
Give it to me. No, the phone I mean.
Ada, is that you?
Give me cornetto. Your turn, Mum. Sing it.
Oh, from Walls Ice Cream.
Yes, Mum. Love it.
Deliciously creamy, crunchy wafer cone, and the secret chocolate hidden in the tip. Connect with the ones you love this summer. There's just one Cornetto from Walls Ice Cream.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, Every journey matters.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all higher. Gold climbs past $1,800. Bloomberg Balance of Power is brought to you by SEI, with an operating platform designed to support all major asset classes, diverse strategies, and investment vehicles. SEI is redefining wealth management. Learn more at SEIC.com/IMS. It is an up day. Shares are rising as investors look past tensions between Washington and Beijing, and they're seeking out companies thought to be insulated from rising coronavirus infections. Here's where we stand. S&P 500 index up 9 now, a gain of 0.3%. The Dow up 5, little changed at 25,892. NASDAQ's been trading at a record, up another 104 points at 10,448. For NASDAQ, that is a gain of 1%, brings its year-to-date gains to 16.4%. 10-year down 3/30 seconds with a yield of 0.65%. Gold up 1%, $18.13 right now for an ounce of the precious metal. Crude pushing higher as well. West Texas Intermediate up 0.8%, $40.94 a barrel. Recapping, equities higher. The Dow just turning negative, down a point. S&P up 8, up 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is time now for Bloomberg Opinion, and today we welcome columnist Jonathan Bernstein, who has a piece out actually on what I might call voter suppression, but not the kind you expect. This is raising the question whether President Trump might be perhaps inadvertently suppressing his own vote. Jonathan, take us through it. How could that work?
You know, Trump has been trying to scare everybody about vote by mail, and with a bunch of sort of fantastic, improbable scenarios about massive fraud through vote by mail. Now, in fact, there's no real danger of that, but there is now a danger, and Republican campaign operatives are worrying that Republican voters who might otherwise vote by mail, absentee vote, may refrain from doing so, and if they're also afraid of voting in person, they may not vote at all. So suddenly, Republican campaign professionals are worried that Republican turnout could be affected by this.
Well, and particularly among perhaps the older, middle-aged older voters, which were in 2016 a big help for President Trump. If people are worried about their health and they don't believe in the alternative of mail-in, or if they succeed in defeating those initiatives in some states, it could really go right at Trump's base, couldn't it?
Exactly. That is who votes for Trump, and that is also who is the people who are most afraid in a lot of instances of voting in person, where even if they decide to do it, if we have a rush of older people who normally vote by mail, normally lots of Republicans do vote by mail. Lots of Democrats do also. We're expecting way more this year. And most states have sort of loosened the rules because, they don't want too many people to show up on Election Day. In fact, there's a big problem of not enough poll workers on Election Day. And, so states are reducing the number of polling places and hoping that they can use vote by mail. And that's true in both Republican and Democratic states. But Trump, he's, telling these stories of, foreign operatives stealing ballots out of people's mailboxes. So there's a possibility that older Republican voters are going to show up in polling places and cause huge lines and maybe get discouraged and not stick in the lines.
Yeah, and when you talk about poll workers, I must say from my very unscientific sample of one, at my poll, every time I go in to vote, it is very elderly, tend to be women who are in there, and I'm not sure how willing they're going to be to show up, even if they have it fully open and they don't just move it over to the mail.
No, absolutely true. I always sort of refer to poll workers as little old ladies, even if they're younger and male. But mostly, you're absolutely right that they're older people, and it's not going to be a good idea for a lot of those people to work the polls. In fact, one of the things that people could, if you're looking for something patriotic to do to volunteer during these times, get trained as a poll worker.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jonathan. That's a really good point. So I'm not going to ask you to get inside of Donald J. Trump's mind, but why is he doing this? You mentioned some Republican operatives are concerned about it. Is he getting counsel that says this is a good issue for him to really go after mail-in voting? Because, boy, he's not been shy.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where he saw it on Fox News or he sees it in conservative media or something like that, and he's just running with it. What we know about Trump is that he's going to say that there was voter fraud this year. We know that because 4 years ago when he won, he claimed that there was massive fraud without any evidence, and he continued to claim it after people looked into it. And, he had specific complaints about California and New Hampshire.
Yeah, he claimed he won the popular vote, actually. He claimed he won not the Electoral College, but also the popular vote. There was fraud that kept it from him.
Yeah, or he said he would have if it wasn't for fraud. But people looked into it. There was no evidence of it whatsoever. So, given that he claimed fraud when he won, the odds are that he's going to claim fraud whether he wins or loses. And it seems that he's sort of laying the groundwork for that now, although I don't see how it does him any good one way or another.
Yeah, although, Jonathan, I'm glad you raised this because you must have given some thought to this. As I look forward, and I hope this isn't true, I can envision a world in which, A, you don't know the results on election night because you have so many people sending in absentee ballots, and it takes a while to count all those things, and B, a lot of challenges in a lot of different locations. You could have the year 2000 where there was that big fight in Florida on steroids.
Absolutely, and you make an excellent point. We should all expect for a lot of votes to come in after Election Day, and even worse from this point of view is that there's a tilt to it that generally, for lots of reasons that are completely legitimate, not, fraudulent anyway, but typically Democratic votes get counted slower than Republican votes. It has to do with when people vote, or different demographics and all that. So, yeah, and we're, all the people who are the experts in this are expecting to see a flood of lawsuits and a flood of legal claims, and it could be, if it's a close election, it could be very, very messy.
Well, exactly. I mean, we had a big problem in 2000, making sure we got it done in the month of December. We might end up not being able to have an inauguration in January. I mean, as I say, I hope that's not true, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Well, we hope that the courts would move quickly. We hope that bogus claims would be dismissed right away. But it is something that, the experts on this stuff are really concerned about. One of the things that helps is for all of us to set the expectations. Yes, It's going to take a while to cut.
Exactly. Patience is going to be difficult. No. Okay. Thank you so much to Bloomberg Opinion columnist Jonathan Bernstein. You can read more on this and other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal by typing in OPIN GO. Coming up here, the future of natural gas pipelines after 3 adverse decisions. We talk with the head of the American Petroleum Institute, Mike Summers. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are modestly higher, lifted by tech companies. The Dow is up 52 points, NASDAQ up 113, S&P 500 up 13 points. But airline stocks are lower today. United Airlines has notified 36,000 employees, or 45% of its U.S. workforce, and said they might lose their jobs on October 1st when the federal payroll support expires. Hurt by the pandemic's impact on clothing sales, Brooks Brothers, the men's apparel retailer, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It plans to sell a number of stores as it looks for a buyer. And Ascena Group, which owns the Ann Taylor and Lane Bryant women's clothing chains, is close to filing for bankruptcy. As many as 1,200 stores could be shutting down. But shares of Twitter rose today on news it's possibly planning a paid version of its platform. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
How long? How much?
How many? Financial, policy, and medical experts are working on answers 24/7.
What about public debt?
We are listening to those experts 24/7.
Is the Fed effectively widening this wealth gap with its programs?
Because you want answers too.
What's the most important, the trillions in stimulus, the economy's reopening, or the infections curve bending?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Are you interested in a challenging and exciting...
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday evening by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Hi, this is Mike Tirico, introducing you to Sports Uncovered, the newest podcast series from the storytellers at NBC Sports that will shine a fresh light on the most unforgettable moments in sport.
The reason why I'm smiling, I might get in trouble for this.
Search Sports Uncovered to start listening today.
We're all guilty of spending too much time on social media. Why not add something genuinely useful to your feed with TuneIn? Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to learn about some of the best stuff happening around the app. You might just discover your next audio obsession. Who says only the experts get to do the talking? On the Scuttle Puck NHL Hockey Podcast, irreverent outsiders Mike Bond and Dale Horde give their untrained opinions on all things hockey from the fans' perspective.
I don't know how you get those guys out of there. And Crosby, as great as he's been, it's just such a different era, so it's tough with the... he didn't have the crazy number of points that Orr, Lemieux, and Gretzky did. They just...
Search Scuttle Puck on TuneIn to listen.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour, Kenan Thompson. He's the longest-running cast member ever on Saturday Night Live, and it took him years to feel like he belonged.
It just never seemed real for so long. I had such a hard time even associating myself being on the show for a long time. I wouldn't watch, you know what I'm saying, just because I felt like I was ruining it.
Kenan Thompson joins us next time on the New Yorker Radio Hour. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, 3 important decisions on gas pipelines raised questions about the future of the business. Mike Summers, head of the American Petroleum Institute, is here. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Much here's what's going on. Decidedly mixed picture. We've seen a lot of volatility today. The Dow swinging between gains and losses right now. The S&P is holding higher by 4 points, up 0.1%. Little changed. The Dow also little changed, but negative now, down 0.1%. Lower by $25. 25 points, I should say. NASDAQ is up 89. That is a gain for NASDAQ of 0.9%. 10-year down 1/32 with a yield of 0.64%. Gold up $15.72 the ounce, up 0.9% at $18.10, and a retreat for crude oil. West Texas Intermediate up 0.8%, $40.94 a barrel. Tech shares are rising as investors look past tensions between Washington and Beijing. They're seeking out companies thought to be insulated from rising coronavirus infections. Most stocks, though, lower on the S&P 500 index, but advances in high-flying tech stocks like Apple and Amazon leaving the gauge higher. For instance, those two stocks, as I mentioned, they're both trading higher. Apple shares up 1.7%, Amazon up now by 1.9%. Mortgage applications are up, even as the coronavirus intensifies. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Demand for new loans led last week's 2.2% increase in mortgage applications, further evidence of revival in a key sector of the economy. Refinancing also rose, with the average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage in the neighborhood of 3%. Refis made up more than half of last week's mortgage applications, freeing up household cash. Looking ahead, preliminary forecasts indicate housing starts accelerated in June, rising by 20%. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
United Airlines Holdings says it has notified 36,000 employees, or 45% of its workforce, that their jobs are at risk after federal payroll aid expires at the end of September. Shares of the airlines in general are lower today. UAL is down by 3.1%, American down 3.2%, Delta down 2.5%, Southwest down by 2.4%. Recapping, equities trading mixed, the Dow down 12, little changed, S&P up 5, up 0.2%, NASDAQ up 0.9%. NASDAQ is at a record. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues, and once again, here's David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. When President Trump came to office, the future of the energy industry looked rosy, with strong fundamentals getting a further boost from the president's commitment to break log jams over major pipeline projects. But in the last week, that all looked less certain, with adverse court rulings on the Dakota Access and Keystone XL projects, and Dominion Energy shutting down the Atlantic Coast pipeline.